All right, hello. Good morning, everyone. Hi, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure to order. Welcome to our second meeting. Can we please have the secretary call the roll?
Senator Daley, Senator Krasner, Assemblywoman Brown-May,
Here.
Assemblyman Carter,
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Here.
Assemblywoman Gallant,
Here.
Vice Chair Watts,
Here.
Chair Harris.
I am here, and I'd also want to note that I do see Senator Krasner on the Zoom, so please mark her present. Okay, looks like we have a quorum. Please go ahead and indicate any committee members present as they arrive if we have some latecomers. All right. Welcome, Senator Krasner, who is an alternate today for Senator Buck. Before we start, we're going to go over just a few housekeeping items. Just throughout this interim, committee members may be attendance in Las Vegas or in Carson City, or they may be attending virtually, as you see here. Similarly, we will take presentations in all of those formats as well. Committee members, if you're attending virtually, try and keep your video on during the meeting to ensure we have a quorum, but I always understand if you need to take a little break and turn your camera off. Be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. All presenters are asked to make sure to turn on their microphones before they begin their presentation. If committee members have any questions during or after your presentation, please identify yourself each time you respond to the question. That makes it a bit easier for our secretaries in completing the minutes for the meeting. This committee is largely paperless, meaning that all materials are provided electronically, so please do not take it as a sign of disrespect if you see members looking on their computers or using their phones to review materials. Anyone who'd like to access our meeting materials can find them on the committee's webpage. Anyone who'd like to receive electronic notification of and access to the committee's agendas, minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the Nevada Legislature's website. Finally, I'd like to mention that a solicitation of recommendations memorandum and related information has been uploaded to our committee webpage. This memo asks all interested parties to submit recommendations to us for potential legislation. As a reminder, this committee may request up to 10 BDRs, and I encourage all members of the committee, as well as individuals and organizations, to bring forward recommendations on possible legislation. We want to hear suggestions from you. So please, please, please submit them. No idea too big or small, no problem too big or small to try and tackle. And if you have any issues with submitting those recommendations or finding that memo, you can always email me directly or text me, and I will help facilitate that, okay? Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and an additional opportunity to make public comment will be available at the end of the meeting. You can provide public comment in person, either here in Carson City or in person in Las Vegas. You can do it via telephone, and the number for that is located at the top of today's agenda. Is there anyone here in Carson City who would like to provide public comment? All right, come on up, sir. Please go ahead and spell your name for the record. Don't forget to tap on the mic when you begin, and you will have 2 minutes.
My name is Drew Rebar. I'm a candidate for Assembly District 40. This is why. Tanya Laney, the director of DMV, is here today. I'm glad for this. I am here because the DMV, NTA, DPS, and Nevada Attorney Generals have been creating ad hoc rules. as defined by the Nevada Supreme Court decision in the Trolley versus Public Service Commission 1989 decision. Ad hoc rules are unconstitutional and a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. Tanya Laney, her team, Director Butler before her, J.D. Decker, the Nevada Transportation, all of these agencies have created ad hoc rules. The NTA and DPS have created an ad hoc rule that have created a tax across the state, primarily affecting those in the urban areas, leaving those alone in the rural areas. This was illegal, unconstitutional. Director Laney's organization has created ad hoc rules to deny businesses profit, specifically stated multiple times in emails and other documents generated therein. I sent an email over this morning with some of these documents so that you can see what these documents are. If you compare these documents in their timing to AB 57, you'll notice that, gee, you probably shouldn't have been forcing these violations of law. NRS 233B, the Administrative Procedures Act, is very, very clear on the process to create regulations. Yet the executive branch doesn't need the Assembly, doesn't need any of you, doesn't need me to run because they can create rules all by themselves and enforce them with their guns and badges. God bless them. This is America. This is why I'm running, because our system is screwed up. The executive branch has taken over. The Assembly doesn't matter. The Senate doesn't matter. None of your voices matter. Thank you very much. There's Director Laney right there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Carson City who would like to provide public comment? All right. Is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to provide public comment? Okay, don't see anyone rushing to the tables. BPS, is there anyone on the phone lines waiting to provide public comment today?
Thank you, Chair. There are currently no callers to provide public comment at this time.
All right, we will then move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes for the meeting of January 24th, 2024. The minutes for the meeting have been distributed to committee members for review. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Madam Chair.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion from Assemblyman Watts, a second from Senator Daly. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Okay, the meetings for the minute of January 24th, 2024 are approved. We will now turn to several presentations today that will focus on transportation issues, traffic safety, and transportation infrastructure. First up is Mr. Sever. And the rest of the team from the DMV. We have Miss Laney, Miss Molly Lennon, and as I just mentioned, we have Mr. Sever as well. Please go ahead and begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Harris and members of the committee. First, thank you for having us here today. For the record, I am Tanya Laney. I am the new director of the Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles, and I just assumed my position on March 2nd. And we appreciate your guys' time today to give you some updates on where we are with our agency. I would also like to introduce in the audience with me today, we have our new Deputy Director, Angela Smith-Lamb. We are very excited that she has accepted that role. Comes with a ton of experience and a fiscal background with the agency, and so we're very excited to continue marching forward with the missions that we have with my operations experience and her fiscal. We think that we'll make a great team. And also at the table, I have our administrator of our research and project management team, Molly Lennon. She's also leading our department transformation effort. And then also to my right, I have our deputy administrator and legislative liaison, Sean Sever. And between the three of us, we're going to give you guys an update on where we are in our agency today. So again, I thank you guys so much for your time. And I will not read the slides slide by slide because you have that information in front of you for historical purposes, or give you a recap of my experience because it's all there for you. But I will tell you that one of my main priorities carrying the agency forward, and that I take in my position very seriously, is to be the sponsor of our department transformation effort. So what that means is that I will be continuing to lead the agency, supporting our staff and all of our leadership team on those initiatives moving forward so that we can provide our constituents the system that they have asked for that gives them the ability to complete service transactions through our agency online whenever possible, or freeing up space in our offices at our windows for our most at-need customers that need to come in and see us. And they're not able to do so now in a timely manner because of all of the demand on the agency currently. So our hope is through our transformation transformation service offerings that we're freeing up some of that capacity to allow additional customers to have access to us and sooner. And then I will carry it forward and let Molly give you guys an update on where we are on our transformation effort.
Thank you, Tanya. As Tanya mentioned, I'm Molly Lennon, the Administrator for Research and Project Management, lead for our transformation effort. Our DMV transformation effort is a multi-year project with an identified 800-plus products and features, as well as 90-plus integrations being moved online and prepared for cloud mobilization. Currently, we are on track and within approved budget. Transformation of our services will be an ongoing effort, even after project end date, as its focus is not just on technology, but full transition of our business model and continuous improvement and innovation. We've made amazing progress since we began implementation, including release of case management for our Compliance Enforcement Division and Salesforce, 2 dealer title releases, design of the new registration online application process, which is currently in development and slated for release in July. Our content services platform box was selected and is currently being implemented. A proof of concept for future state online payment design, including service fees, has been completed. Implementation of future state insurance verification through Motor Vehicle Solutions, or NVIVS, to name a few. The next few slides will give you a glimpse into some of the screens that we see both internally and our customers see. The first is our CED case management solution used by our DMV officers and our CED staff. Customers can now file complaints online. These screens give notices, tasks, reminders, etc. that are useful to our staff. Continuous enhancement is underway, including upcoming use of Amazon Web Services and Tableau for reporting and visualization of case information. The next slide you'll see is a glimpse into our customer portal. Our customer portal has been designed, and this screen gives you an idea of the information requested to complete their Salesforce portal accounts in order to request a product. The next slide is our payment record review screen. This is the design and proof of concept for our customer payments review. They will be able to view all fees and other important information related to their transactions, including their fee history. And then the last is our Nevada IVS Insurance Company login page. Most of our Nevada insurance companies are already registered and excited to participate in preparation for our modernized verification processes. This will be integrated with our Salesforce platform when we go live with new registration. Additional progress related to our IT teams. Collaborative efforts between our vendor partners and our in-house IT include identity management functionality for our customers and staff to securely log into Salesforce, data model refinement, ABI, OCR, and document verification implementation within our dealer titles pilot, integrations to auto-verify VIN and address, Amazon Web Services and Salesforce data sharing capabilities have been stood up, and our Amazon Connect implementation is underway for modernization of our call center. Version 1 is in the design phase. Some additional features that the overall DMV has added since launch of DTE include allowing customers to self-track shipment of their driver's license and IDs, chatbot, online title fee payments for dealers, online movement permits, online written testing for instruction permits and driver's licenses, just to name a few more. And then the last thing I want to highlight is our dealer title pilot program. We released version 1 in February of 23. This allowed submission of documents electronically prior to a check and hard copies being mailed in, allowing pre-approval. It reduced the turnaround time for those participants to 1 week. In November 23, we released version 2 and increased the participants to 21 dealerships, adding real-time notifications of document upload inaccuracies, and allowed electronic title payment through our existing EDRS portal. This dropped turnaround time for those participants to 1 to 2 days. Expansion planning efforts to add additional dealers is underway now. With that, I will pass it to Sean Sever for more highlights on additional DMV efforts to improve our services.
Hello, Chair and committee members. Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. It's good to see you all. So online written testing is one of the things I'm going to talk about here. This really interests me because I have a 15-year-old son that is really close to driving. So we now have our online written drive tests. Well, they're online now, so you don't have to come into an office. It's $6.75 each day to take the test. It's available in Spanish, but you have to do it on a laptop or a desktop computer. So, and this is just a taste of what the Department Transformation will do for the DMV. Since we launched this in October, more than 33,000 tests have been taken online, preventing that many visits to our offices, which equals about 6,000 a month and 300 people a day that are not coming into our offices. So it's good news all the way around. The next topic I wanted to cover is on customer service. So you're going to like this one because I assume you get complaints from people that wait until the last minute to renew their driver's license or registrations. And we'd humbly ask that you encourage these customers to go online or visit a kiosk to avoid a trip to the DMV. But we're doing a pilot test with this new system, Waitwell, in our Reno and Fallon offices. It will be offered in all of our offices by the end of April. The way it works is customers can check in on their mobile devices, get text message reminders and real wait time estimates, and customers can provide feedback on their experience. Rural customers can scan a QR code when they walk into the building and get into the walk-in queue, and then return later when their appointment draws near. The Reno DMV office is currently 10 days out for appointments. So third-party drive exams is yet another way we're trying to keep people out of our offices. It's not that we don't like to see people. We just can't handle the old business model of everyone trying to pile into a DMV office. So this program allows third-party drive schools to conduct drive exams and certified drivers. The drive school instructors will be trained and certified by the DMV, and they must take a refresher course every 4 years. We have 9 Southern Nevada schools interested and 1 in the north that will participate in this pilot program. And then classic car insurance. AB 349 from the 2021 legislative session required owners of classic cars to carry classic vehicle insurance. And what was happening was that people with older vehicles who were using them for everyday use were claiming them to be classic vehicles, so they could avoid taking smog tests in our 2 largest counties. We actually received quite a few complaints when this program started at the DMV because people blamed us for putting it in place, but that has since settled down. We were tempted to provide them with the bill sponsor's cell phone number, but decided against it. I'm just kidding. But this is really a success story because, and we thank the vice chair for reducing the amount of people take advantage of this program because it's gone from 35,000 people to 25,000 in 1 year. And then legislative bill implementation. We are happy to report that we have implemented all DMV-related bills from the 2023 legislative session by their required dates. We do want to thank you for being patient with us and delaying implementation of your bills until after our transformation is complete. We have implemented some of these bills early, and we will be asking you to do the same in 2025. However, please realize that we will put these bills in place as soon as we possibly can. And 2 of the bills I wanted to point out were AB 151, which is the UNR 150th anniversary license plate. And then another license plate was SB 164, which is the Divine 9 license plate honoring black fraternities and sororities colleges in Nevada, and that plate is available right now. And then this is our contact information. Please be sure to contact me if you need anything from the DMV. We're ready to answer questions now if you have any. Thanks.
I don't see your cell phone up there, Mr. Sever. Okay, I have just a couple of questions, and then I know Senator Daley has some questions as well. My first question is related to the insurance verification system. Will law enforcement agencies have any access to that as well? And I'm asking because, the classic question we get pulled over is insurance and registration, right? So if we have some statewide system where we can automatically verify insurance, it seems like it would be nice to maybe make that system also compatible where law enforcement agencies can verify insurance. Has there been any discussion about making that a possibility?
Thank you for the question, Chair Harris. For the record, Tanya Laney, Director, Nevada DMV. So where it comes into play with the insurance status on a vehicle is it is tied to the registration status. So if there is an insurance issue on the vehicle, then when the registration on the vehicle is pulled, it will be inactive or suspended, and that will give law enforcement an indicator that there may be an insurance issue. The insurance itself, no, it's currently not tied.
Okay, so if I am understanding you correctly, this system will allow you all to almost immediately suspend registration when insurance lapses, and the lack of registration information will be available to law enforcement officers.
That is correct. That in combination of whatever the customer is able to provide roadside as far as a digital or paper-based copy of their insurance. But if they don't have insurance on the vehicle, then you have to have insurance on the vehicle to do that initial registration. But if it's past that initial registration point and they're pulled over and they've had a lapse of insurance, then there will be an indicator on their registration, and the registration is suspended until they get the insurance situation cleared up.
Okay, next question. Will they be allowed to clear up insurance information online?
You can do that today, actually. So if you go onto our website through dmbnb.gov, there is information on there now to be able to update your insurance if you've switched companies, or if you've received a letter from us in the mail that states that we don't have your current insurance. Could be something as simple as the insurance company does a download to us, and for some reason your policy did not update, then the customer has the ability to do that themselves today to put the insurance in there to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information, and that's real time.
But that would not, does that also include, my insurance lapsed, but I now have gotten new insurance and I want to make sure the DMV is aware of that?
Yes, that is a perfect situation to update it, yes.
Fantastic. We're on a roll. One more. I believe currently, please correct me if I'm wrong, if your registration has expired, you still have to go in. But if your registration is current and you're updating, you can do that at a kiosk. Do we anticipate allowing folks to be able to go to the kiosk or online after the lapse, or are we going to keep forcing them to go in?
Great question. You can actually do that transaction online today as well. So we have expanded the time period of the cancellation of the insurance, cancellation or suspension of the registration. You can go online up to 18 months past the expiration of your registration to reinstate.
Okay. Now I'm wishing more Nevadans watch this. There's probably not as many as we'd like who want to have that information. So if you're watching, tell your friends, because that's great news to hear. Thank you. Senator Daley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry I was a couple of minutes late, got here as soon as I could, but I just wanted to, and I think you guys might have answered one of my questions on how long the wait is if you're trying to make an appointment. I know I tried making one, and this is several months back, and it was like 6 weeks. You could get on there and say, well, the next available date is 6 weeks out. And I said, no, we'll figure something else out, because the temporary plate would have expired by then, and I see a lot of expired temporary plates when I drive around town. But I think the gentleman said it's down to 10 days currently.
Senator Daley, thank you for the question again. For the record, Tanya Laney, Director of Nevada DMV. It is, and that's the average right now statewide for our metro offices that accept appointments. We're at a 10-day average right now to get in. In addition to the point that you just made, if the vehicle is purchased from a Nevada dealership, so it has that Nevada dealership temporary placard on it, all of those vehicles are eligible to do their registration online through the EDRS paper that they're given at the dealership without a visit to the DMV. So sometimes you will still see those plates on the vehicles and it may be expired, but it could be that they've actually already registered online, but they're waiting for their plates to come in the mail. So if it's grossly expired, then that may indicate a problem. But we do occasionally see where individuals will use that up to the end of that 30 days that they have on that placard, and then they're still waiting for their plates in their mail, which can take an additional 7 to 10 days. So there is occasionally a window where you'll see that it's expired, but they are registered, just waiting for their products in the mail.
Understood, and that I'm assuming is fairly new, because I know the last time I had to do a new registration, I had to go in. So, and there might have been other factors on title change and some other things that caused Tappan to go in, but I tried to set up the appointment and it didn't work out. So the second question related to that, and these are all Northern Nevada related kind of questions, various things. I know you could do walk-ins, and then there was walk-ins only certain times, and then walk-ins were canceled, and now they have walk-ins again on Saturdays. It's not very well advertised. People don't know. But I think part of the frustration and then the timing that you had to make an appointment, how have you handled, or have you been able to adjust on the number of cancellations? So what's the cancellation rate? Someone makes an appointment and then they don't show up. And then when those appointments don't show up, how are you guys then creating space or trying to take advantage of, hey, well, that one canceled. Do you call somebody? Do you send emails? Do you just say, we're going to open up walk-in? Because when you had cancellations as high as 40%, I had heard. You can tell me if that's the wrong number. Then you had people sitting at their stations because you turned everybody away, no walk-ins, were full, and then it turns out you were only 60% full and not 100.
Thank you again for the question, Tanya Laney, Director, Nevada DMV. You guys are the best at being advertisers for our agency and all the great things that are going on. So based on this question, I have great answers for you. We are currently with our appointment system. Again, we're only about 7 days out right now in Northern Nevada. 10 days is the statewide average between all the offices that take appointments. But in Northern Nevada, you can find an appointment as soon as this afternoon on occasion, because with our new appointment system that we started with Waitwell, you get indications throughout your journey as the customer via text. And if you cannot keep your appointment, you can cancel via link through the text messages that are coming to you, and that frees up that appointment immediately for somebody else in the community to pick up. So back to your original comment that we were seeing about a 40% no-show rate, that's accurate, and I would say that's actually probably even on the low end from what we were seeing. In the South, we were seeing probably closer to a 50 to 60% no-show rate depending on the day. Currently, we do still have walk-in Wednesdays, giving the customers the ability, if they can't wait 7 days for an appointment, then they have the ability to walk in on a Wednesday. We're seeing the crowds that are waiting outside of the office on walk-in Wednesdays get less, again, because we believe that the appointments are available so much sooner. But with that new appointment system, again, it does two things. It sends you a link to confirm your appointment. So the customer is saying, yep, I did intend to make it. That's the day and time. That's the office. That's where I want to go. It's reminding you ahead of time before your appointment. And then it's, again, providing a link for you to be able to cancel that appointment if you do not want to keep it so that somebody else can pick it up. So if you go to our website right now, you'll see that Waitwell is implemented in Reno right now as the first office that's accepting appointments. Starting around April 6th, I believe, believe it is, we start the rollout with the rest of our offices statewide, and we will be complete with the rollout of our offices by the end of April. So all of the offices will be on the same appointment system, and we do anticipate to see the exact same return on our investment through that system that we see in Reno, giving many more constituents the same ability that we have in Reno to manage their appointments in that manner and notice the rest of the public that there's appointments available if those customers cannot keep them. So we're very excited that that system has worked the way that we intended it to, and that it is providing a benefit to the community and to our staff so that they can manage the flow better in the offices and have customers at their windows continuously versus sitting there calling an appointment that never intends to show up at their window.
If I may, Chair.
And thank you for that. Oh,
If I
Go
can
ahead.
add to that, Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. I think it's important to point out, of course, we want people to go online. And I think the majority of people that come in to our offices can do their business online, and we haven't fully implemented our transformation yet. But one really important fact to point out is when people renew on the kiosk or online, they have to wait through the mail to get their registration, their plates. But once they register, they are live at that point. So if you're waiting until the last minute, you know, we have kiosks in Reno, Las Vegas, also a kiosk in grocery stores. Those are great options for registration options, and just trying to really encourage people to think online first.
and thank you. And it is, thank you for the update on some of those things. Those are just some of the things that I've heard from people and experienced myself. I know I went last time I had to go to DMV on a Saturday, and got there an hour and a half before you open, and I was like the 200th person in line, right? Wrapped around the building in Reno, if you've been there and seen it. But we got in, and it went relatively quickly, all things considered. I tend to use the kiosks. They work very well. I'll advocate for those as well. And then as far as the vice chair's phone number, feel free. I have a classic vehicle, but I had the right kind of insurance, so it was no big deal. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Watts, I believe you have a couple questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, my phone number is 867-5309, so share it far and wide. So one of the questions I had is around the in-person drive test. So, you shared a little bit of information about, opening it up to third-party providers to help provide a little bit of a release valve. As far as folks that are choosing to come and take those tests in offices, how are the wait times looking for that? Because I know that was that was an issue in the past.
Thank you for the question again, Tanya Laney, Nevada DMV for the record. We can get that information to you, Vice Chair. Last time I looked, we were about 60 days out on average for those in-person drive test requests in our metro offices.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be great to just see what how those trends are looking over the last little bit of time. The other thing I have is not so much of a question, I guess it's a comment. So you went over it briefly. I just want to say it's great to see that we have decreases in our staff vacancies in many of the positions across the division. To me, that shows that some of the improvements that we made for pay and benefits during the last session is working. I did see something about technicians, and that there are still high vacancy rates among technicians, and also the salaries are low. So I'm just going to say that, and I know that we try not to turn this into the budget committee, but I look forward to seeing the department submit something to help get technician pay to be competitive and attractive, and I look forward to seeing the governor include it in his next recommended budget.
Vice Chair Watts, again, Tanya Laney for the record. Thank you for that comment. Absolutely. We intend as an agency to work on that with our leadership. Our staff are our most important assets, right? And first, we would like to say thank you for everything that occurred this last session to give our employees a little bit of the benefits back that we've seen lost throughout the years. We definitely, think the governor's executive order that puts a moratorium on the minimum qualifications to be able to get staff in at some of the higher rates. Because you touched on our technicians, one, that's in mass, the majority of the positions that we have at the DMV. Those are our front counter staff that are our face-to-face, the face of the agency, if you will, that most of our constituents come in contact with when they visit our offices. And without them and that continuing expertise, the turnover in those positions, because other state agencies do love DMV staff because they are trained very well. They're great stewards of public servitude and customer service. But we do need to, submit additional recommendations to get those staff more equitable with what we see in the state. I do know that there's a classification study that's being done, and we're anxiously awaiting our turn to meet with the consultants to let them know, what our staff are doing work duty-wise that compares with other positions in the state to create that equity so that we don't, at a minimum, lose our staff to other state agencies for the same positions that they're completing at our agency for higher pay. So that is definitely something that we're looking at. But again, we thank this body and the governor's office a million times over for the benefits that we did see this last session, because we do think that helped a lot with the turnover. We are not having an issue recruiting at this point in time. We are getting the positions filled, but depending on the day of the week that you ask for the numbers, we could have a higher vacancy rate just because we do in turn lose those positions elsewhere in the state for higher pay. But it is definitely something that we're keeping an eye on, and we're very appreciative of everything that's been done to date.
Okay, I have a couple more questions for you. Are you good, Vice Chair Watts? Any more questions? Okay. Do we see a future where folks will be able to register online after a private sale, or is that coming at some point?
Again, for the record, Tanya Laney, amazing question. Yes, absolutely. That is going to be our first initiative that is going to be the most public-facing and visually available transaction for the agency. COVID taught us a lot of things, and one of those was that was the biggest roadblock for customers accessing the DMV is if they had a private party vehicle sale. Because either it's, they may have purchased it out of state or they may have purchased it from their neighbor, but because it was not from a Nevada dealership, we didn't have that information readily available to us, and those were the customers that needed our services the most during COVID. So that is the first priority of the transaction that we're rolling out with our new transformation effort, and that is going to be roughly...
Molly Lennon with Nevada DMV. So our first release in July will be new registration, and immediately following by the end of the year is that private party title availability. So I think that they really go hand in hand, right? The title and registration are required for those private party transitions. So those are our two most visible and will be highly, our most highly used transactions, which is why we are starting with those releases. We are piloting the new registration that's releasing in July with our Sahara and Elko offices, and we will be looking to expand that to as many offices as possible as quickly as we can, knowing how feasible that is as we learn from the release.
Okay, let's keep pushing. Do we ever see a future where you can register the vehicle simultaneously with the purchase?
Again, Tanya Laney, for the record, thank you for the question. Yes, so through our current EDRS process, that is available now if you purchase from a Nevada dealership. So as long as the lien holder has already been identified, because that information is needed to perfect the title and to be able to offer the registration online, you're provided a EDRS or electronic dealer report of sale that gives you a link today to register that vehicle online. Now, if you're purchasing the vehicle and you're paying cash, or maybe you had pre-approved funding and that lien holder is available to you immediately, then essentially you can go home that day and register your vehicle through our EDRS transaction. So we are going to continue to enhance on that program, but that is an option that's available today in certain situations.
Well, I recently purchased a vehicle in February, but it took about a week and a half to get that EDRS form from the dealership, even though I already had the lien holder identified. So I don't know why the dealership was taking so long to get me the paperwork if they're supposed to be able to do it instantaneously, but that was not happening quite yet with the particular dealer that I purchased from. So, but good to know that that is a goal and still coming and is actually physically possible, but maybe not happening. Okay, I believe Senator Krasner had some questions. Go ahead, Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and thank you so much for being here today. So the SR 22 form, which is lapse in insurance coverage, twice now I've had experiences where I've heard of, well, one, we were at the DMV and there was a senior citizen woman at the kiosk next to us dealing with the employees. We overheard her because she was crying, talking about how she didn't get the letter and her insurance had lapsed. And even though it had only been like a couple days, it was a $250 fine. And when she called down to the DMV, they said, you can't even drive your car here to take care of it. Because the police will pull you over and they'll take your license plates and they'll impound your vehicle and it's against the law. And so she said, well, how am I going to get there? And they said, well, you'll have to take a bus or get a ride from a friend. And then they told her, excuse me, go online and make an appointment. I guess it was before the Saturday walk-in. This woman was in tears. And also that she said there was like a large fee. It was only a few days, but it was $250 fee plus reinstatement fees plus this fee and that fee. And she was very distraught. That was the first example. Then more recently, a college student, a young man, same thing happened. He missed the letter and it was only like 24 hours, but it was going to be a $250 fee, whether it's 24 hours or 30 days. Excuse me. And he didn't have the money. And I'm sorry. He was considering committing suicide because it was such a mess and he didn't know what to do. And the appointments were 2 weeks out. And there's all these fees and penalties. And you can't even drive your car down here. And I just, I'm wondering if there might be a better way, or maybe if, I don't know, just it's been twice now where I've overheard some horror stories. And so why is it the same penalty for, 24 hours or 48 hours as it is for 30 days? Maybe we could graduate that penalty. Like if it's 48 hours, you get, zero penalty, but then after that it's $250, or I don't know. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on this, on how maybe we can help as lawmakers. Thank you.
Thank you for the question again, Tanya Laney, Nevada DMV, for the record. So per the current statute, the 1 to 30 day lapse of insurance is one fee structure, which is the $250, and then on the 31st day through the 60th day, I believe it's the second tier. Those tiers are outlined in current statute. The customers have an option in regards to exceptions to those rules. We do hear from customers all the time that maybe they were in the hospital, or they are a student that's out of state and they didn't receive notice and the vehicle's at home and it's not being driven because they are in the hospital or out of state. We have a affidavit of non-operation that those customers that can fill out that waive that fee. We have a whole list of hardship exceptions that our staff look at for making sure that the customer really does owe that fee. So there are exceptions to the rule, but as far as the fee structure, that is clearly outlined in statute currently for the insurance verification program that was passed by legislature several years ago. But where we can, we definitely do take those situations on a case-by-case basis. One of the things that we know that we are lacking in currently, that we are expanding on through our department transformation effort, is having our constituents be able to have better access to speak to a DMV employee one-on-one in regards to these situations. Currently, we have a phone room team of 6 individuals that take the calls for the entire state of Nevada when it comes to DMV business. So as you can imagine, that's not sufficient for what we see for customers that need to access information with us. We have taken steps to increase that accessibility to this point. We have a chat bot that is in place that is learning as our customers submit questions to it. It grows as the database grows with the questions and the answers. We have a contact center model that just actually kicked off their project at the beginning of this week, that is a sub-project to our main transformation efforts, to get a contact center stood up to allow customers to be able to access us by phone, by chat, to have web calls where they could talk just like we're talking to you now in the South to get answers to those questions. So as far as the communication, we know that that's something that we need to get better at, to hear those stories from the customers and give them the options that they have to waive, if possible, to have an exemption to waive those fees if it meets the criteria as it's currently outlined in statute. As far as if we have revisited what the fee structure would look like, again, that bill was passed in legislature several years ago. It was not one that the DMV brought forward. It was brought forward, by the legislative body. And if there's, language changes or additional things that could be done there, I know that we've heard rumblings of that in the past, and we're always happy to work with legislators if they have questions or they believe a change needs to be done to that structure. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
If I
Thank
might,
you.
if I might add to that, Molly Lennon with the Nevada DMV, one of the things that we're doing in modernizing with our motor vehicle solutions, NVIVS, the insurance verification solution that we are moving to will modernize and give us the ability to better support our customers. MV Solutions actually acts as a direct liaison with our insurance companies and adds an additional layer of support for our customers to try to resolve those lapses before they even have to go into the DMV. We're hopeful that there will be even more ways for us to modernize and further support the customers to avoid missing notices, to avoid not being able to get through, in time to take care of those issues. So a lot of great functionality will come from modernizing with this new vendor partner.
So, Senator Krasner, I think I'm hearing a couple of things. Hopefully, one in the future, there will be no requirement that folks have to go in person to update their registration if it lapses or their insurance when it lapses. So, hopefully, we can limit occurrences where folks feel like they have to take the bus because their registration is lapsed one day or two. But I also want to invite you to submit a recommendation for the committee to consider if you'd like to look at legislation that, either adjusts those fees or creates better guidelines for when those hardship exemptions should be put into place. It sounds like that might have to be a legislative solution, but if that's something you'd like to bring forward, please do.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair. If
Mr.
I may,
Sever.
Sean Sever, for the record, I'm happy to help out your constituents as well with these one-off cases. And my phone number is also 687-5309. No, I'm just kidding. Legislators send me cases all the time that are hardship cases like this, and I'm happy to work with you on them.
All right, Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Senator Krasner, I'm actually happy that you brought this up because I think we are seeing something that is not one-off. It actually just recently happened to me where my insurance company decided to drop us, and I am still waiting for a letter letting me know that they have canceled our car insurance. And the only reason why I happen to know is because it didn't charge my credit card. I got it a week later, and so I had a week's lapse. So I am stuck with 4 fees of $1,000 for 4 cars. And the insurance company actually decided to drop us because my mom had 3 claims on our insurance last year. So I think maybe this body needs to go ahead and take a look at the burden of the burden that needs to be on the insurance companies to notify. I was told I was sent one letter several months prior, but no confirmation on whether I actually received it. Obviously not. And I think the severity of the lack of responsibility from the insurance companies on trying to contact their customers really probably should be taken care of or looked at just when you were taking a look at, like, with this automatic suspension of registration, because the insurance company was quick to let DMV know, but not quick to let me know. So maybe that's something that we can look at, Senator Krasner, in terms of legislation and making sure that we're protecting our customer. Okay, sorry, that's my 2 cents or soapbox on that one. Question. So I've been in conversation with Mr. Sever about this. So it turns out in 2026, City of Henderson is no longer going to have a DMV in our city limits. It's moving probably 10 to 15 miles away from us, depending on where you live in Henderson. And it'll be over on the west side of 215. I understand that we're going to have this amazing online portal that we're going to be able to access. And I do have to give kudos that you guys are using Salesforce, because that's an excellent company when it comes to software. I use it personally. But we have a lot of constituents that are not computer savvy. And my mom being one of them. So she's 81. What are you going to do? And we have a huge age-restricted community, 55 and plus community throughout Las Vegas and Henderson. And it's going to be a big trek for them to be able to drive over to, Silverado Ranch area. And it's going to be even a heavier lift for them to be able to use the computer. So is there any, and I know we've talked about this, but maybe if the DMV is open to working with some community partners to allow the ability to be able to utilize the online portal, but with some guidance from community partners, so that those that are uncomfortable with the computer system, or maybe even have some language barriers as well, or maybe don't have scanners, or maybe don't have a desktop, could be able to just drive a few miles from their home to be able to utilize the fantastic services that DMV will be presenting online.
Thank you so much for the question, Assemblywoman Gallant. Again, Tanya Laney for the record. So I am happy to announce that we have partnered with AAA. You may be familiar that we do DMV transactions with them over the counter in different areas in Las Vegas, and an office in Sparks, Nevada. And they are going to be opening up services over the counter at the AAA in Henderson. So we do have that option as one community partner. And I will tell you that we have been actively engaging with document preparation services, otherwise known as registration services, for several years, because today they currently hand walk in paper documents to our offices for staff to complete over the counter. And we have been encouraging them and trying to push them along, if you will, to let them know, we've been very transparent that our online world is coming, that this is what our customers have asked for. And that we encourage them to get involved in adapting their business model to be able to assist those customers. There's nothing that restricts them from doing transactions online for a customer today. We have looked at integrating in our software not a separate portal, but a box that can essentially be checked to let the agency know that somebody else is completing that transaction on behalf of another customer, so that if there's later complaints about the transaction not being done appropriately, or that they didn't do the transaction, that we would have a mechanism to track those types of transactions. But yes, we have been taking that into consideration. And then again, with the contact center that I mentioned earlier, to where we will have, for the ones that can use the technology with the assistance of family or a neighbor, even though we can't deal with somebody on their behalf electronically for some of those transactions, if we could at a minimum have somebody assist them, we could still talk like we're talking today, if they can, if they have a neighbor or family member that could help them out. But yes, we are looking at the community partnerships as well, particularly in the Henderson area. We have heard from that community the concern that office is shutting down. We've had many questions as to why, And a very quick question as to why is that we are legislatively kept under a cap for our operations, and we simply can't afford to have the new facility in addition to the Henderson facility, and we've just outgrown the Henderson facility. And we can't split our staff and put half in the new building and leave half in Henderson, because then we just don't have the staffing to fill the new facility and use it for its intended purposes. But yes, we are looking at community partners where we can to help with those transactions, absolutely. And taking that into consideration throughout our transformation as we go through it.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of AAA, what kind of services do they provide currently, and what types of services are they going to be able to provide once the new system is in place? And then why is it just AAA? Why hasn't it been extended to like Allstate and State Farm and Geico and, all the other insurance companies as well?
Great question again, Tanya Laney, for the record. So AAA, we had a provision in statute several years ago that allowed us to partner with them because our missions aligned as far as, road safety. We have been approached by other insurance companies that have stated that they would like to support the same model. And we have seen that a lot of those insurance companies serve a dual purpose as an insurance company and a registration service that I had mentioned earlier. So they do end up getting licensed through the Secretary of State's office as a document preparation service that can help with DMV transactions as well. So there is an outlet for those that have been interested to assist the community through that means. As far as the transactions that are available today through AAA, I don't have an exhaustive list. I can get that to you. We do list it on our website as well, but it is the majority of our registration and titling transactions that we offer at the DMV that we would consider standard, so no special circumstances as far as like a probate case or an estate or a transfer on death or something like that. But if it's your standard across the board title and registration, then AAA is able to assist with those transactions. For obvious reasons, when it comes to identity and driver's license and ID credentialing, that is still only done at the DMV just because of the nature of those transactions and us verifying the breeder documents, which would be, passports, birth certificates, social security cards, all the other requirements that we have to be able to establish identity. We house that still within the agency.
So is that going to be able to be done online with the new software?
Yes, we are expanding our services in all of our categories where we can online. And yes, part of that does include bringing on tooling that can do some of that identity verification for us. So for example, you would submit your documents or your information, and we work with a software type platform that can verify that those identity documents are valid. And so we are looking at that as we expand our transactions as well. And as we expand our online availability, then we will look at expanding our partnerships with, AAA and our kiosk transactions as well. We're just not there yet. But it is something that as we expand and it becomes easier for our partners to be able to manage that, where they don't have to have the full breadth of knowledge that a technician needs to have at DMV now, where they're going through 4 months of training and then 6 months on a window to really get comfortable with a basic transaction. That it's a balancing act, right? So we have to make sure that we're being responsible, that we have the right people performing those transactions, so that we don't have fraud or a high error rate that's taking our resources somewhere else to counteract to get those transactions done. But it's absolutely something that we're looking at expanding. As we expand, we've already had conversations with AAA. They are interested in expanding their service offerings to the community as well.
But not ID, correct?
At this point in time, we have not had the conversation with expanding our partnerships in the ID realm, but it is a focus of our transformation effort to move more of that availability online and to use the tools to do some of the document verification.
Okay, so I just to, think about this is that once you reach a certain age, you have to have your driver's license and your ID or your driver's license every 4 years. Isn't that correct? I believe it's every 4 years. And so now I've got a huge, constituent base here in Henderson that if we aren't allowed to do it online or have some assistance close by to home, we're now going to have people driving 10 to 15 miles to to get their driver's license every 4 years rather than every 8, which seems like kind of a high burden considering we've moved DMV outside of Henderson. So I hope we can explore that further so that we can provide more accessibility to some of our elderly constituents.
Thank you for that comment, Assembly. When we are actually looking at the availability of partnering with, we collect something from our customers now called a CPR, or it's a physician's certification that individual has the medical ability to continue to drive safely. Part of the check now when those customers come into our office is a visual inspection of the customer, if you will. Are they speaking clearly? Did they walk to the window okay? Because a lot of times our staff will be the front line that catch maybe a medical condition or something that's going on with the older population that if they don't have family around or other people that they interact with are not catching. So part of the reason for having that interaction with the customer is to be able to make sure that they are safe to operate a vehicle on the roadways. But I will tell you, we are again looking at expanding that partnership where we could receive the physician's report of that customer having a safe ability to drive that they can get done on their closest doctor's appointment before their driver's license is due to expire, and being able to accept that documentation electronically, avoiding that visit to the DMV office.
Thank you.
If I could add, Molly Lennon for the record, Nevada DMV. One of the things that we'll be doing as we move closer to lifting our credentialing product online is public outreach campaigns. That's going to include asking our customer base of all walks to participate, give feedback at different stages in our software development lifecycle. So I would really encourage any of you who have constituents who are concerned either about learning how to use online process or have very specific concerns like what you've just outlined, to please reach out to us. We would love to take note of individuals that are willing to participate and also those concerns so that we can specifically focus on those when we do our public outreach focus groups, et cetera.
Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. So a question came up after Assemblywoman Gallant just spoke to you. You said that if somebody who's over a certain age comes into the DMV and the person behind the kiosk sees something like the way they're talking or walking, they can not reissue their license? Are the people behind the kiosk trained medical professionals? Are they doctors and nurses? I mean, I can see if they don't pass the eye test, but just based on their non-medical view, they can not reissue someone's license because of their age. Did I understand that correct, please?
Thank you for the question, Tanya Laney. For the record, you are correct. So the customers, there's a place on the application for customers to let us know if they have an existing medical condition. So if the customer that is in front of us is exhibiting signs that there's confusion going on, and we've caught on occasion where customers are sitting in front of you and they can't remember their name, for example. If something like that occurs, our staff are mandatory reporters, and so they have the right to be able to request a letter from a physician stating that that individual is safe to operate a vehicle on the Nevada roadways.
Follow-up, Chair. Wow, that's pretty random. Seeing as how they're not healthcare professionals, they can make that judgment and then immediately suspend and not reinstate someone's license based on their age, which it kind of sounds like age discrimination there, which is a violation of federal law. And then the person has to go get a doctor's letter to say that the non-healthcare professional at the DMV is wrong, so they can't drive, and then how are they going to get down to the doctor? How can somebody, so the only way they can overcome the non-healthcare professional behind the DMV kiosk judgment upon them is to go get a letter from their doctor? That's the only way they can refute that false claim? Is that correct?
So they can provide a letter from their physician, and also our drive examiners have the ability to retest them to make sure that they could operate that vehicle safely. We have, not only do our DMV technicians have that availability, but also our local law enforcement. So if local law enforcement has an engagement with a customer roadside and they have reason to believe that there's something going on that deems them an unsafe driver, either because they visually saw the vehicle swerving on the road and there's no reason to believe that they're under the influence of anything, but there might be a medical condition going on, they also have the right to request a physician's report on that driver. So it's our staff and law enforcement that could have those interactions. And then we also have mandatory reporting from the physicians if a constituent has a seizure that occurs for driving, then that is something that has to go through a reevaluation and to make sure that they can safely operate that vehicle and they're not at risk of having one in the middle of driving as well. So there's different situations that occur that tie in law enforcement and the agency to either retest their driving ability with a driving exam or with that confidential physician's report to make sure that they can safely operate a vehicle.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair. So I can understand law enforcement. You know, they see somebody swerving, they pull them over. Law enforcement are trained professionals to see these things. But is there any training the non-healthcare professionals at the DMV behind the kiosk that are given the right to not give somebody their license based on zero medical knowledge? I mean, what kind of training do they have? And what exactly are the flags? I know you said if they can't remember their name. What are the other flags? Again, I'm okay with the eye test, but this sort of random, like, oh, well, you know, you're not speaking clearly today, so I'm so sorry. We're just not going to be able to give you, you know, your license reinstatement. And, oh, by the way, you're over a certain age. I don't know. Maybe you can explain that to me. What is their training? And what exactly are the other factors, not including the eye test? Thank you.
Thank you again for the question, Tanya Laney, for the record. So our drive examiners are trained through AMVA, American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, and we have a standard that all states which all jurisdictions in the United States are members of this organization, and they have expanded training on making sure that our drivers are safe on the roadways. So we follow the standards through that organization, and they do have the expanded training on that for the customers where it's identified at the DMV, not through law enforcement or a report through a physician about a seizure disorder or something of that nature. Other items that our staff a better example other than, you know, slurred speech or somebody not remembering their name would be, for example, a customer that came in that maybe had an accident and they're now missing a limb. There are special provisions that need to be on your driver's license to state that you can safely operate a vehicle with adaptive equipment if that's what it takes to operate the vehicle. So there's different situations such as that occur that the customer might not have. Maybe it's their first visit to the DMV since they've been in an accident and occurred the loss of that limb. Or they had a medical condition that came up in the interim, and your first thing that you think about is not going to the DMV to have something put on your driver's license to make sure this, you know, your interaction with medical personnel or law enforcement roadside tells them that you have a condition or something of that nature that has occurred, or to let the DMV know because you need to have a restriction placed on your driver's license for, you know, daytime driving only, if there's a visual issue, nighttime hours, stuff like that. So our staff are the front line to catch those issues as they occur, because the next time that they see that customer is typically when they come in for that renewal. I mean, we can get you numbers on what we see as far as staff having those interactions with customers. It's not high. And the situations that we do see are, it avoided somebody that, you know, possibly just had a stroke or something the night before that didn't know that they had a medical condition, but that technician looking out for that individual's welfare, knowing that there's something off with them and they haven't disclosed something on the application, they're required to report that so that individual doesn't get into their vehicle and cause an accident on the roadways because they themselves don't even realize that something has occurred. So again, it doesn't happen frequently, but it is something that our staff are responsible for being aware of. And then we have the expanded training with our drive examiners to test their ability to make sure that they could safely operate that vehicle on the roadways.
And just one last follow-up, Chair. Thank you. So is this your DMV personnel? Is this all people of all ages that they can do this to, or just people of a certain age?
Good question. Thank you. It's every single customer that sits in front of us at the DMV, regardless of age.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Gallant.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate it, but this has actually added a whole other sort of question about this non-healthcare person, and I understand there's training. I am curious, is it ongoing or do they just go through it once? And then my second question is, if they deem somebody who showed up to the DMV as unable or concerned about being safe on the road, what is the process for them once they are stuck at DMV and now not allowed to drive? So how would a person handle that situation, or how does the DMV handle that situation? Because it just seems like there's no due process, and we don't have a trained healthcare professional doing this, and now this person is stranded at the DMV.
Good question. Again, Tanya Laney for the record. We're going to get together some information to get to the committee so that you guys have our process and what our staff look for and the checklist that they follow in regards to these situations, so that you guys have the information readily available on how these situations are handled.
Okay. And then the training, is it ongoing or is it just one time?
It is ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, committee members, do we have any additional questions for the DMV? Well, we have them. Okay, not seeing any. Thank you all so much for hanging in there and answering all of our questions. Sounds like you guys are up to some great things. We look forward to seeing the DMV of the future here shortly.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a presentation by the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. They will be discussing their annual report and hopefully, if I know Miss Davy, also some recommendations for us. Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I think the chair of the committee is in the Las Vegas location, and he's going to start the presentation.
Lovely. I believe we have Mr. Bennett. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning. For the record, my name is Andrew Bennett, and I have the privilege of currently serving as the chairman of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. The Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety is also known as NVACS, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this information today about our annual report in that capacity. The Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety is committed to enhancing the safety and well-being of our communities across Nevada by improving traffic safety. In the brief time that we have together today, it would be impossible to comprehensively paint the full picture of traffic safety challenges and the solutions in Nevada. The complexity of the issue, intertwined with the diverse experiences of our communities, defies a simple summarization. However, it's our goal to provide you with an overview of the current landscape of road safety in our state. We aim to highlight the most pressing concerns, underscore the human impact of traffic fatalities, and outline actionable steps that we can pave a way for a safer Nevada. Today is just the beginning. We are not here to offer a one-time presentation, but to initiate and continue an ongoing dialogue. Traffic safety is not a static issue. It evolves with our roads, technologies, and our communities. NVACS is committed to being a continuous resource for each and every one of you. We are here to provide data, insights, and support you all as you make the critical decisions that shape the future of transportation safety in our state. Today, I have the privilege to be joined by two of my incredible colleagues. Amy Davey is the Highway Safety Director for the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety and the immediate past chair of NVACS, and a man who needs no introduction, Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV, who is currently the vice chair of NVACS. And I pass it over to my colleagues in the north for the presentation.
All right, thank you. This is Amy Davey with the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety. Nevada has had a state traffic safety committee since 2005, And in 2021, the committee was defined in statute. The role of the committee is to review, study, and make recommendations regarding evidence-based practices for reducing and preventing crashes, review and analyze data on motor vehicle crashes, including factors that cause them and measures to prevent them, and to consider policies intended to reduce or prevent crashes. Next slide, Sean.
Hello, legislators. Sean Sever for the record, and I serve as vice chair and DMV's representative on the committee. Thank you for hearing us today. We really appreciate it. Traffic safety continues to be a huge issue in our state, with fatalities up 31% in February over the last year at this time. For example, pedestrian deaths have gone from 11 to 23, and motorcycle fatalities from 4 to 10 in Clark County so far this year. And it's an epidemic at this point. But on the slide, we have hundreds of safety partners that work on different emphasis area actions across the state that roll it up into 4 key areas that all provide input to NVACs. And this is kind of an eye chart slide, but our 4 key areas of emphasis are safer roads, vulnerable road users, safer drivers and passengers, and impaired driving prevention. Our member agencies on the NVX committee include, you can see the following: Department of Education, Health and Human Services, the DMV, DPS including OTS and NSP, lots of acronyms here, NDOT, state legislators are on our committee, Administrative Office of the Courts, the Intertribal Council, NACO, League of Cities, Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs, NSHE, Carson Area MPO, the RTCs in the North and South, and the TRPA. And all of us deeply care about the families that have an empty seat at their table at night from a traffic safety fatality. We want to move the needle in our state to prevent more deaths. So the annual report is a summary of our recommendations, including evidence-based practices to reduce or prevent fatalities, data on motor vehicle crashes in our state, and policies intended to reduce or prevent deaths and injuries. So we submit it to the governor and LCB, and we hope it provides legislators tools so you can join us in trying to reduce and prevent fatalities.
Hi, this is Amy again with the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety. In the next few slides, I'm going to walk through briefly some of the data and roadway fatality trends in our state. This is the kind of information considered by the committee when developing its annual report. I won't have time to go into much detail, but I'm happy to follow up with any members of the committee to provide data specific to their districts or jurisdictions, or to go further into particular issues or areas. We've also recently updated our equity and traffic safety in Nevada fact sheets, and I would be happy to provide those as well. The pandemic marked a notable change in roadway safety and risky driving behavior. This trend has continued, and we're concerned that there is now a new norm in Nevada on our roadways. You may have seen that yourself in your communities with speeds or aggressive driving, or just sort of a general less of a sense of community for those that are on the roadways. So on this slide, the 2-year change that you see from 2020 through 2022 reflects a pretty steep increase in traffic fatalities in our communities. And this was on top of numbers that were already too high and that we have been working for years to reduce. Next slide, please. We also convert our numbers into rates so that we can put them in context with factors like the number of vehicle miles traveled in our state and population growth. These are 2 questions that come up frequently when we look at our numbers. And you can see that within these metrics, our fatality rates have also increased. Next slide, please. Our pedestrian fatalities are high and are increasing. Nevada has been designated a pedestrian-focused state by the U.S. DOT and the Federal Highway Administration due to the high proportion of pedestrian roadway fatalities. In January and February of this year, 2024, you heard Mr. Sever mention close to 50% of our fatalities just in those 2 months are pedestrians. and this represents a significant increase over last year. Pedestrians are what we call vulnerable road users, and this is a term which includes people who walk or ride bicycles or use other types of micromobility for their transportation. We know there is a transportation and infrastructure equity component for individuals who don't have access to a vehicle or to safe and sufficient roadway facilities or public transportation options. We know that in Clark and Washoe County, our unhoused populations are at increased risk, and national and Nevada statistics bear out that minority and low-income communities are disproportionately represented in crashes. For our student populations, Clark County School District is reporting that 98 students have been struck this school year in school zones. Washoe County is reporting that 64 school-age children have been struck in school zones this school year. With respect to speeding and some of the speeds that we're seeing on our roadways, since 2020, there has been a marked increase in speeding. And I don't mean 5 or 10 miles over the speed limit. I mean speeds double the posted speed limit and speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour, sometimes even in our surface streets or in our community roads, and 100 miles an hour is not a posted speed limit anywhere in Nevada. A review of our data system shows close to 5,000 citations written last year for speeding in excess of 100 miles per hour. Next slide, please. Intersections are dangerous places in Nevada. You can see a high number of fatalities occur at intersections. This can be red light or stop sign running. Sometimes it's what we call darting, or drivers who are attempting to turn left with unrestricted oncoming traffic. Vulnerable road users who are crossing at signalized or unsignalized intersections are particularly at risk. Regarding impaired driving, this numbers that you see on this chart are alcohol impaired driving numbers only. In my office, we've been hand tracking fatal crash toxicology results for a number of years and find that there is substance involvement in 50 to 55% of fatal crashes, with polysubstance use growing most quickly. It's a higher component now than alcohol use. Polysubstance would be alcohol in combination with drugs or multi-drug use. Next slide, please. Unbelted vehicle occupants represent 40% of our vehicle occupant fatalities. So if you think about that for a minute, we separate out vehicle occupant fatalities from other things like motorcycle or pedestrian. And 40% of individuals who were killed in the vehicle are unbelted. This also could include children that are not properly restrained in a car seat or booster seat. You can also see that our young drivers that we identify between the ages of 15 to 21, these fatality rates have increased steeply in the last number of years as well. This is the data that we've brought to you today, and once again, I'm happy to provide data for your communities, for your districts, happy to provide maps. We work closely with our partners to make sure that we're bringing forward just as much information as we can, so that you have the information that you need to make good decisions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. Andrew Bennett again for the record. As outlined by Sean, one of the primary functions of NVACS is to provide the legislature and the governor's office with a list of priorities intended to reduce and prevent deaths and injuries on Nevada's roadways. This list that you see before you isn't comprehensive or final. It's an ever-evolving list that addresses possible legislative changes and policies that road owners could adopt today. It's important to note that our annual report is over 200 pages long and includes detailed data and further explanation of these policy priorities. I would like to spend our remaining time briefly going through some of these policy priorities, as we know that there might be several questions on a few of them. I'll start by combining the first two, which is road safety cameras, also known as automated traffic enforcement, and road safety cameras in school zones. The Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety recommends eliminating the current NRS that limits local and state agencies' abilities to use road safety cameras. This technology stands out as a critical tool to combat road traffic fatalities and serious injuries. With an evidence-based approach, automated traffic enforcement, including speed cameras, red light cameras, and school bus stop arm enforcement, has consistently demonstrated its capacity to alter driver behavior, reducing speeds and decreased red light running, key factors, as Amy pointed out, that contribute to severe crashes on our roads. And the proof is in the performance. Data and studies across the various jurisdictions have showcased the effectiveness of road safety camera systems in enhancing road safety. For instance, the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety reports that cities employing red light cameras have seen a 21% reduction in fatalities due to red light cameras. Similarly, speed cameras have led to significant decreases in vehicles exceeding the speed limits, contributing to a safer environment for all road users. This is just one report that out of thousands of pages of resources that we can point to showing the success of road safety cameras. But, and this is an important but, at the same time, it's vital to learn from the mistakes of others. The journey of automated traffic enforcement implementations in various communities has not been without fault. By examining the pitfalls that others encountered, we can navigate the implementation process more smoothly, ensuring that our approach is both effective and publicly acceptable. The key to a successful automated traffic enforcement lies in transparent operations. Drawing from the experiences of other regions, we propose a strategic approach that focuses on 4 key areas. Number 1 is community engagement, prioritizing dialogue with community members to foster an understanding about and support for automated traffic enforcement initiatives. Number 2, and probably most importantly, is transparency, being clear about the objectives of the technology, its operation, and the handling of generated fines, ensuring that safety and not revenue is the primary goal. Equitable deployment, by placing systems based on traffic safety data to address high-risk areas without disproportionately affecting any single community. And finally, continuous evaluation, regular assessment of the effectiveness of the technology with adjustments made based off of data. Just a brief history, there has been 2 bills in the recent history that have addressed automated traffic enforcement. Last session, there was AB 93, which this committee used one of their BDRs for, which was automated traffic enforcement in school zones. That did not receive a hearing last session. And then in 2019, the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety wrote or drafted SB 43 in the 2019 session that I believe did a fair job in articulating some of these concerns and building in the safeguards. Moving on to higher fines in school zones, this was language that we believe that NRS needs clarification on. You might be familiar with some of the signs in the school zones that say that. Currently, that does not exist in NRS. Higher fines in school zones can be applied by judges, but there's not an NRS that addresses it. And so we're proposing similar legislation to work zones and pedestrian safety zones. Primary seatbelt law, as Amy pointed out, Nevada continues to experience an alarming number of unrestrained fatalities. Primary seatbelt law is a proven countermeasure that has been implemented by 34 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories. That is for front passengers only, and then with 17 states, the District of Columbia, and 2 territories having universal primary seatbelt law for all passengers. Basically what that means is currently we have a secondary law in the state of Nevada. If you're pulled over for speeding, you can be cited as well if you're not wearing your seatbelt. Again, following the lead of those 34 states, the district, and those territories, we believe that that is sound policy. Graduated driver's licensing additions. Currently in our state, we have a tiered system. You go through your permit, your restricted driver's license, and then your unrestricted driver's license. We are seeing that teens are currently waiting until they turn 18 to get their license. When that happens, they're no longer going through the driver's education system, the mandatory driving hours, and some of those safeguards that are in place. Our recommendation is that we, at least at a minimum, move that age to 20, if not for any new drivers. You know, there's sensible solutions that are currently existing with those minimum hours, with the driver's education experience that we believe should be expanded. With yield to stop, currently, Nevada is a yield to pedestrian state instead of a stop for pedestrian state. We have judges across the state of Nevada that as long as you don't strike the pedestrian, you technically yielded for the pedestrian. And as any of us cross our roads, you can understand how dangerous that could be and uncomfortable for the pedestrians that it can be. And so we're proposing NRS changes that would simplify and strengthen our pedestrian safety laws to require motorists to stop for pedestrians. And then finally, the last two, which I believe are vital, are not intended for legislative change, but are an internal look at road owners' potential policies that they could adopt. Safe Systems Intersections minimizes and is designed to minimize and modify conflict points through engineering improvement projects, reduce the speed of vehicles, improve visibility, and provide space and protections for bicyclists and pedestrians. I'm proud of the work that has been done by our road owners in this area. And again, these last two were newly adopted in this last annual report. As legislation can't fix everything, there are things that we need to continue to do as road owners. And then finally, develop appropriate speed limits for all road users. It's almost universally understood in the traffic safety community that speed is one of the most important, speed control is one of the most important methods in reducing fatalities and serious injuries. And so our goal is to develop and implement proven safety countermeasures to reduce speed through engineering and infrastructure improvement projects. And those efforts are underway as we speak across our state. And so in conclusion, Chair, we all have the opportunity to move forward with a unified vision where our efforts in enhancing road safety echo our commitment to social equity and community wellness. By doing so, we not only honor the lives that have been lost, but reaffirm our dedication to creating a Nevada where public safety is a universal reality, social equity is a cornerstone of our policies, and community wellness is the natural outcome of our collective action. Together, we can build a future where these ideas are not viewed as mutually exclusive, but as interdependent pillars in the growth and the prosperity of our state. Chair Harris, Vice Chair Watts, members of the committee, it's been our privilege to present the work on behalf of all of our members of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety and all of the hundreds of professionals that we have the opportunity to work with every single day. And we look forward to answering any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, thank you so much. I want to, there'll be a theme if you hadn't noticed. I want to encourage you all to please submit these recommendations if you have not already. If you don't know how to do that, you know how to find me. We will make that happen. But please get your recommendations in for the committee to consider, because this is squarely within the committee's jurisdiction to, bring legislation that will make our roads safer. And so we definitely want to see those ideas that have been kind of pre-vetted by you all, so that we can consider bringing them for the next legislative session. All right, with that, do committee members have questions? Okay, we'll start with Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you, Ms. Davey and Mr. Sever for the report. It's sobering, to say the least. I want to go back and look for a little bit of clarification. You reported this morning 98 students in Clark County have incidents that have been struck by vehicles, and that's very troubling. One of the things that I know Clark County is doing is approving additional crossing guards. And we're talking here about suggesting that cameras in school zones would be beneficial. I'm curious to know if there's data from other jurisdictions to support the decreases if we employ those as possible solutions, right, first of all. And then my second question is, With regard to the number of crashes that have grown, are there specific areas in the county that we see higher incidences where these crashes are taking place, or is it widespread?
Thank you. This is Amy Davey from the Office of Traffic Safety, and I'll jump in a little bit on this. With respect to your first question on school zone enforcement, and I'd like to wrap school bus enforcement into that. There are a number of jurisdictions across the country that use stop arm cameras as well. Because this is a particularly vulnerable time for students when the bus is pulled over, the lights are flashing, the stop arm's out, kids are getting on and off the bus, and somebody pulls out and around the bus. With respect to the use of camera technology in those locations, there's quite a bit of information, and I know some more of your presenters today. The National Conference of State Legislatures is going to talk about trends across the country related to that. So there's strong understanding of using this technology, and particularly when you think about a school zone, somebody who's entering a school zone is doing that repetitively, right? It's somebody who's bringing their child to school every day, or maybe that's their route to commute to work. I know in order to get to my job, I had to drive through 3 school zones. So I would do that every day. So the cameras are particularly effective in a school zone for a couple reasons. One, slowing everybody down. But 2, you're getting people used to the idea that I'm in a school zone, I have to slow down, and it's more than, the honor system here. Because these are people that are in and out of the school zones frequently. They're, like I said, they're either commuting through or they're bringing their children. And your second question was regarding high crash locations. Yes, we can map high crash locations. Clark County is actually doing a pretty good job of mapping at a local level their high crash locations. They can tell you, and Mr. Bennett can tell you off the top of his head, because I believe he still personally goes to every single fatal crash. He can tell you where you shouldn't drive or walk in Clark County, because there are definitely dangerous corridors. Transportation professionals across the state map data, collect data, and understand where those high crash locations are. That's not a very specific answer, and so, Mr. Bennett, I don't know if you want to comment on any of the locations in Clark County that you're familiar with.
Thank you. Just to briefly answer the 2 parts. Number 1 is, yes, recently Clark County, the Board of Trust, or the Clark County Board of County Commissioners did recently adopt that investment in middle school crossing guards, which makes us one of the largest jurisdictions to add middle school crossing guards. We followed the data, unfortunately, that we saw that the middle schoolers were disproportionately hit, and that solution has already been deployed. We're over 60-70% of our crossing guards that we recently hired are on the roads today. With that said, we understand that significant investment in infrastructure is also required to ensure that we can get students to and from school safely. And so not a single piece of policy or legislation is going to fix that. It's going to be a tiered approach, leading with infrastructure, followed up by the safeguards of the crossing guards and the possible technology. And then finally, to echo Ms. Davies' point about the mapping, there's plenty of data we can show you where they're happening. There's efforts underway as we speak about making sure that we continue to educate the public and any policymakers of where those crashes are happening, as long with the road owners, so that we can continue to develop those infrastructure investments as well.
Thank you for the detail. I look forward to following up with you offline. On behalf of my constituent who emails me regularly relative to middle school safe crossing, I want to say thank you for your efforts there. I miss my bicycle. It's why I'm wearing my bicycle pin today, because it just is not safe to ride throughout Assembly District 42. And so whatever efforts we can make to make our roads safer, but equitably, right, that's also the main concern. So I'll follow up with you offline. Thank you, Chair.
And if you all could, at your convenience, provide any of the data that you'd like, that you think would be helpful for us as we consider some of these solutions, please feel free to submit it to the committee. You can do so under this agenda item. I believe it would still be open. That way committee members will have access to all of that backup data. Drown us with data. Okay. Senator Daley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation, and we'll get some of that data. It'd be interesting to see. I guess questions, comments on that stuff, on the automatic traffic enforcement through the cameras. I know that's always been a touchy subject and a balance between privacy, did you get the right person, being able to efface your accuser, all of those types of things that come up with that. And I'm sure there's statistics that show that. I know they have it in California, which is, a dirty word. I've never really liked it. So how do they do the enforcement, especially in light of the fact that there's not a current law in Nevada that requires you to have a front license plate?
Thank you for the question. This is Amy Davey, Office of Traffic Safety. There are different models, and states and jurisdictions use different models. One of the things that helps kind of in our current environment is the civil citation model, which we actually proposed when we brought legislation in 2019 prior to the civil citation model that road safety cameras only issue civil citations and that they not go against demerit points on a driver's license. So what you'll see frequently with these systems is, to your point, they're taking, they can do front or rear license plate. And so it's sort of like a parking ticket, if you think about it. If you get a parking ticket, the ticket's on the car infracted, and whoever parked it there is, may not be the person it's registered to, but somebody has parked it in the wrong place. So our one of the models that we see is not about taking pictures of people. It's not about bringing charges against people. It's about recognizing that that vehicle was traveling at an improper speed or ran a red light, and that somebody is responsible for that vehicle. We certainly understand privacy concerns. I think one of the things that is really interesting that has happened in the last 10 years is that we're on camera frequently on the public roads. You're on dash cams or people's cell phone cams. There's cameras on the sides of buildings. There's highway, the RTC uses highway traffic flow cameras. It's not unusual for the public roadways to have some visibility. So I don't think it's as unique or unusual as it was when this law was first passed, which I think was, in the 80s. I can't remember off the top of my head. So, I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add.
Yeah, Sean Sever for the record. I think what we're proposing is baby steps, I guess you could say, of a pilot program for cameras on school bus crossing arms. Now, when somebody pulls up to a school bus and the lights are on, kids are getting out, if you pass that school bus, I think you knowingly are committing, you realize you're doing something wrong. It's not like, I didn't realize I was driving 10 miles over speed limit or I did this or that. You know when you pass a school bus that you're doing something wrong. So that's the idea is, a way and we understand there's controversy around cameras, but that might be a baby steps way of approaching it.
Follow up, Madam Chair. And I understand, and I guess the one thing you said about the baby steps, I guess, is the concern, right? So this worked, that worked. What's the next thing? I've talked to people that say, well, maybe we just need to have the cameras for enforcement. And I realize we have the cameras in a variety of different places, but not for enforcement. You can't get a ticket for it, or other things, right? Baby steps, you're going to have it. People have said, well, let's do it in the school zones, and maybe that makes sense. And well, let's do it in work zones. I've heard from some people on the other side of that. And you can always say, none of us are going to accept that any fatalities are going to be acceptable. We just don't want to go there, and we understand that. But there are trade-offs on all of this stuff. I can give you an example. There's a stoplight for a right turn. This is an example in California. Happened to my then father-in-law, and he passed away, was driving his son's car. And I got a picture of him and the license plate, and they sent the son a ticket. And when he said, hey, it wasn't me driving, you sent the person the wrong ticket, they said, we don't care. It was your car. You're guilty, unless you want to rat out the person that was driving the car, and then maybe we'll go after him. I just think that's inherently unfair. You're going to cite the car when who's driving it. I own 6 vehicles. My father-in-law drives one of them regularly. Nobody else does, and if any significance. But I'm going to have to pay for his tickets now. I just don't think that's going to work. And you gotta refine that a little bit, I think. But I do understand that people are on there, and we don't want to accept any deaths. And I'll just make this final comment. When I watch, you watch some of the race cars on TV, and they're going 200 miles an hour, and they get in a wreck, and they flip and roll and catch on fire, and the guy gets up and walks away. We could make every single car on the street that safe, but it's a cost effectiveness, it's a cost of diminishing returns. It would make every single car $300,000 in order to make it that safe. So we don't do it. So there are inherent risks, and we accept some of that. And that's just some of the trade-offs that you can have. But there are privacy issues. There are, did you get the right person issue? I've never been a fan of the enforcement through the cameras, although I will take some suggestions and take a good look at the school zone, work zone type baby steps.
Okay, Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you. Yes, my questions, I have 2, please, has to start with the recommendation to increase fines in school zones and possibly in work zones. The problem I see with that is that, and it was brought up at the end about social equity, is I didn't hear anything in there about progressive fines or a progressive structure to where, as we know, doubling a citation amount in the bread and butter portion of my district, Sunrise Mountain, would have an adversely socioeconomic impact on those residents as opposed to other more affluent neighborhoods. It's a very regressive structure. And so why didn't we hear anything about that? Or has that even been considered?
Thank you for the question. Andrew Bennett for the record, and Amy might jump in as well. Number one is, the report is 200 pages, and there are recommendations in there that go into that. Being limited to 10, 15 minutes, you try to cover the highlights and then fill in the blanks. That is a national structure that we're seeing, an international structure with progressive fines and the ability to pay. And they're currently in work zones, just to clarify that as well as pedestrian safety zones. The recommendation is to simply look at school zones. But there's no legislation proposed currently. There's not a drafted BDR. It's for consideration and conversation. And we understand that we can't go back to the way of, trying to find our way out of everything as well. Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. As we heard, the school district data is alarming. And again, we believe that we're, through engineering as well through enforcement and adjudication, we do need to address the concerning data around school zones.
I also just want to kind of reaffirm something that Mr. Bennett said, which is we're not, the committee doesn't have a BDR. The committee is not bringing legislation forward. We're making recommendations, and that would certainly be within scope of recommendations when you start talking about the details of how a program might work. But I think one thing to consider is right now there's a prohibition, and so a local jurisdiction would not have any leeway to consider any type of road safety enforcement, technological, using cameras. If there was an approach to do this, it's really important that you don't just remove the prohibition, you create standards for the program so that anybody who's going to, and again, this is a local jurisdiction issue and it has to be based on data. It can't be based on, revenue collection or anything else. It has to be, we have a school district where we need, to slow people down. It has to be based on data. You can write, if, you don't just repeal the prohibition, you say there must be XYZ, a study that shows that this, it reaches this threshold before a local jurisdiction can consider, implementation. So we're not coming forward with a fully fledged program. I did work really closely with the LCB in 2019. This was out of a National Transportation Safety Board recommendation to the state. And it actually came from a Washoe County commissioner who contacted the governor's office and asked if, why were the local jurisdictions being prohibited from considering a technology that could make their community roads safer? They had no leeway whatsoever. So we can go back and pull up SB 43, which addresses some of these issues, if you want to see the work that we did back with the LCB a few years ago.
Thank you. And a follow-up, please, Chair?
Absolutely.
So we're hearing safety and stuff, and again, something that I've heard my whole life growing up here in Vegas is when are we going to move away? And I know you guys aren't law enforcement, but it gets wrapped in. When are we going to move towards what this commission's really talking about, safety, away from hide and seek, and where it appears that the school zone enforcement and work zone safeties are really based around punishment and revenue, we all see it. The minute the first person gets pulled over in a school zone, everybody slows down. But still, we don't have traffic safety officers in high visible clothing, not in high visible vehicles. There's still the standard operating procedure is somebody around the corner taking radars. Why aren't we working towards trying to make it highly visible, not only to truly make it about safety, but also to help protect our traffic safety officers? We had a horrible accident up on I-15 where the construction workers are required to wear high visibility clothes and their vehicles are required to have high visibility placards on them, but our law enforcement are still in urban camouflage. Is that addressed at all? Has it been talked about?
Andrew Bennett, for the record, just to keep it brief, no. Uniform design has not come up at the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. Law enforcement is represented through the Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs, as well as DPS. Lieutenant Colonel is on there. Not to spin the answer, but we're even trying to get away from enforcement as much as we can because the primary focus is the built environment and the infrastructure. We're still 30, 50 years away possibly from that historic change. The investment was made through the bipartisan infrastructure law. That money is coming directly to the communities. We have the opportunity to enact those engineering changes, and we are. But to give you the brief answer, no, that did not come up.
I do want to just comment on, this is Amy Davey, Office of Traffic Safety. With respect to high visibility enforcement, that is a term that is really promoted and commonly used through Highway Safety Office grant programs through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So we call it HVE, High Visibility Enforcement, and we do have a network across the state of law enforcement agencies that participate in high visibility enforcement. And the whole purpose there is that educational component. So they're required to put out a news release in advance of any enforcement activity, and you've probably seen those. You know, Sparks Police, I just saw one this morning. Sparks Police Department will be enforcing speed limits over the next, 2 weeks. So again, and then they join up with other jurisdictions to be visible, to have that calming effect, with the idea of not just hiding and writing tickets, but letting people know we're here for public safety. We want you to know we're here.
Assemblyman Carter, if you are interested in having the committee consider something around high visibility enforcement, please feel free to submit that recommendation. If you can't figure out how to do that, let me know, and I will get that information to you. Any additional questions? Okay, we will go to Assemblyman Watts and Assemblywoman Gallant. I see your hand. Vice Chair Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few, if that's okay. I'll try and keep them very brief. So I appreciate kind of the description of the approach and methodology moving from infrastructure and looking at these various things. I also really appreciate you bringing up some of the equity concerns and learning from lessons in other places if we were to look at, for example, automated traffic enforcement. As I know you're aware, we've got the Fines and Fees Justice Center is going to be on the agenda presenting some of their thoughts and findings. Since you're up first, I just wanted to ask you, if you haven't already, are you committed to working with them and others on the front end? Because, I understand we're the lawmakers and legislators. One of the things that has kind of come to the forefront, I think, already is that you need community engagement, not only in the implementation of something, but even in figuring out what some of those guardrails should look like if a policy were to be passed to explore kind of a pilot program. So I just wanted to quickly ask any of the representatives if you've reviewed those and if you're committed to working with particularly that organization as well as other community members to try and iron out some of those potential concerns, before bringing forward a potential policy.
Yes, thank you.
Andrew Bennett for the record.
Go ahead, Andrew, sorry.
To get the yes from me, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had an opportunity to reconnect with Ms. Mosley this morning and Mr. Shipak. I'm sorry if I don't say that right. You can correct me. We had an opportunity this morning to reconnect a little bit. We've done some work previously, and we quickly agreed that there are, there's a lot of effort that needs to go into improving our communities and access to safe transportation. And so I do believe that we can have productive dialogue, absolutely.
That's great, because again, I know that it's a large body that's already considering these things, but we know that there's even more voices that should be part of those conversations as well. So I appreciate that.
And if I could,
the next question I had was,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could just, I want to mention one more thing that my office is engaging right now with the Nevada DOT, and we're working with the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition to stand up some community-based projects around getting feedback from communities on their safety issues. We want to hear directly from them, and we at the state level know that community engagement may not be our strong suit, and so we're looking for those local partners that we can work with to get that feedback. That gives us important information on interventions that a community that makes sense to that community, whether it's better lighting or a crosswalk or more enforcement. I attended a community event last week up here in the north with the community that lost a 9-year-old girl trying to cross the street. And they were wanting to have dialogue about all kinds of interventions. And so I want to let you know that, at the state level, we understand that sometimes we don't touch and get to every jurisdiction, but we're committed to trying to get better at that. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but we've got a $2 million program that we're going to implement through the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition, hopefully, to do some exactly that, to have that feedback.
That's great. So that kind of leads right to my next question, which is, you provided some excellent, clear data on the impacts of not wearing a seatbelt and being unrestrained in leading to fatality, certainly grave injury. Again, I think historically there's been a lot of concern about a primary seatbelt law and how the enforcement of that could potentially have equity impacts. So I just wanted to, again, make sure that I agree that we need to take action on some of these things. I think that is clearly backed up by data, that we need to address that. At the same time, concerns about, is that being used as kind of a pretense for a stop? Again, concerns about, equity. I kind of second what my colleague Assemblyman Carter was saying about, I think the biggest thing is that there's some visibility and that people are pulled over and cited, and not that penalty becomes a significant economic burden on folks. So is that also something that you would be looking at to learn from other places and potentially kind of pioneer in looking at an equitable approach to a primary seatbelt law?
That's a great question. I love that question. I'm going to use Utah as an example. They passed a primary seatbelt law, I want to say it was 4 years ago, and they did it through a phased-in, or what they called a pilot project. So in the first 2 years of that primary seatbelt law enforcement could only provide education. They could engage somebody who was not wearing their seatbelt, but they could only provide education. They could provide them with a pamphlet. They could talk to them about the importance of wearing a seatbelt. And I think they had a 2-year lead-in period where the focus was on incentivizing and educating people to wear that seatbelt for their own safety. And that law had a sunset on it. It was a 2-year primary seatbelt law with a sunset. And they were required to do a lot of data collection pre and post. And when they came back after 2 years, the legislature affirmed that not only had they done a very good job with educating the public about better seatbelt use and compliance, but that they felt that the timing was then right, and people then understood that it was a policy going forward. I will say that we conduct regular surveys of our citizens across the state. The most recent one showed that because of the large influx that we have of new residents from other states, and Nevada is one of just few states left that doesn't have a primary seatbelt law. Most people think we have one. It's kind of interesting when we do these surveys. Most people will say, I never thought about it. I just thought I'm supposed to wear my seatbelt. And then I'm going to make a kind of a naive statement, and I'm going to embarrass myself. But I 100% agree with you on enforcing things that are that have positive benefit for society versus, well, I'm just going to leave that there. Sometimes we create a policy just to say it's the right thing to do, and it doesn't have to be all about. It shouldn't be about all about the cops. I think we have a law that says you can't smoke cigarettes within 25 feet of a building, and I don't know anyone that's ever gotten a ticket for smoking cigarettes. So sometimes I think we set policy because we say, as a society that cares about people, we want to say this is the right thing to do. That's just probably naive.
Andrew Bennett, for the record, briefly. The intent of the committee moving forward, we will have one more report before the next legislative session. And I can't speak for the committee as a whole as we haven't voted on it, but there is a strong desire to ensure that we protect the idea of traffic enforcement for traffic safety. There was several pieces of legislation proposed last session about secondary violations that was proposed by the chair of this committee. And largely we were in support of, ensuring that crash-causing violations continue to be cause. Administrative, we're largely okay with that. But anything that can cause death is going to continue to be the primary focus of our committee and ensuring that that behavior can be corrected and nothing else.
Thank you. I appreciate all that was said on that. So another thing you noted was the heavy involvement of substances. I know some of those substances it becomes tricky. Alcohol is one that we've had something kind of a structure in place for quite some time. I don't see any recommendations related to alcohol, so I don't know if it would be breath interlock devices or anything else, but you have any thoughts on addressing particularly alcohol use on roadways? Because it seems like we already have all the DUI laws in place, and yet it's still a significant factor in the crashes and injuries and deaths that we're seeing.
Andrew Bennett, for the record, I think one of the largest gaps that you just identified, which is something that we reflected internally on during the committee meetings, is that we don't have a single policy or recommendation related to impairment. The almost sole focus of us moving forward is to develop those recommendations. And I think some of them might not even have to do with the people behind the wheel. There's a conversation, about what does it look like going back to the establishments, and those will be proposed by our committee to you all through our next annual report, which will be before the end of the year.
And through my office, this is Amy Davey with the Office of Traffic Safety. We're also focusing on interventions, so it's not, taking somebody who's impaired and driving dangerously off the road is an intervention. But we are also looking at how do we provide more effective interventions. In my office, we provide a lot of grant funds to DUI courts and to intervention programs. And we've just recently very successfully worked with the DMV on creating, updating the DUI curriculum for those that receive a DUI so that it's an evidence-based DUI intervention program. So we can certainly talk more about, maybe an all offender assessment through the court. We think that could be something that could be considered. Currently, individuals that get a DUI are only getting assessments at 0.18 or later if they've had multiple DUIs. But those assessments, those interventions can be really effective as well in helping somebody, with making those choices. But to Mr. Bennett's point, we did miss the mark. We didn't put forward anything on that, and we're going to go back and look. It's April, March. We're going to have another report out in 6 or 7 months, so we'll definitely include that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that not everything has to be legislation. Unfortunately, some of the things that we find here can't be legislated. People know what the speed limits are. We've heard that there's some excess speeding. And there's only so far that legislation can go. So hearing about a range of initiatives to try and address these, and the data collection is really key because that helps us again make those evidence-based, data-driven decisions, knowing, for example, how effective deploying crossing guards is going to be, and some of these other policy or non-policy interventions as well. That brings me to the last piece. So we know that there's hot spots. And again, we are a committee that deals with infrastructure. You mentioned we've got more resources coming towards some of those things. I'd just like to step back and see at a high level, what does the coordination look like with our state and local planning entities to kind of mesh together infrastructure needs and those high incident areas to figure out how can we change the built environment to reduce crashes, to either slow folks down in certain areas or make the whatever the lighting or other structural improvements are needed to clean up some of the places that are the most dangerous.
Thank you for the question, Andrew Bennett, for the record. And there is not a lack of coordination in traffic safety. As Sean pointed out, the hundreds, if not thousands, of dedicated individuals that work in this space. When it comes to infrastructure, anytime that we touch the road, we should be looking at safety improvements. We all have lived through very long and burdensome traffic delays and orange cones recently, and there needs to be a trust from the community, and we're working on that of when the road is touched, we do make improvements. I can tell you in my day job that is something that we are actively working on, and there's 3 or 4 projects that I'm very excited about when increasing accessibility for all road users, up to taking away or right-sizing the road, making sure that the roads are the appropriate width to help with that built environment. And again, this next month is 15 years that I've spent working in traffic safety, and this isn't me just saying this. I believe now more than ever before, especially with the historic investments that are out there and the money going directly to the communities, that we have the opportunity and we need to seize that moment to build those infrastructures in place. And the meeting that I'm missing right now is with the RTC, with the Safe Streets for All programs, and making sure that we are aligned as a region, especially here in Southern Nevada. And that also includes NDOT. 33% of our fatalities in unincorporated Clark County happen on NDOT right-of-way. And so making sure that they're involved in the conversation as well, which they are, but making sure that we continue to see action. But the built environment is the number one priority in traffic safety and the engineering improvements that can come along with that.
Thank you so much for your responses, for the presentation. I look forward to continuing the discussion, diving in more. Thank you for the indulgence with the round of questions, Chair.
Vice Chair Watts, I won't ask you for your phone number, but we do have a assembly position open on the committee. And you are obviously very knowledgeable about transportation issues, so maybe you'd consider joining the committee. We are missing our assembly committee member.
And we'll get to twins some more. So just keep that in mind. Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you. So I just want to address the automated traffic, like the cameras. So I got an interesting email, which I've got in front of me, that I'm going to paraphrase. So a constituent, he was law enforcement for 21 years in California. He doesn't want to tell me where, but he said that they had the cameras. And after like 20 years, the city's fatality traffic collisions average actually increased. And that he believed and witnessed that it was more of a revenue stream for the city than it actually did reduce the traffic incidences. And that instead he suggests that we should look into to have the traffic unit focus on primary collision factor citations. And that this was a proven method to reducing collisions, and that there's various cities throughout the country that have implemented this. And so I'm wondering if that has been looked at as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. This is Amy Davey with the Office of Traffic Safety. To my knowledge, for instance, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has a traffic unit. Most law enforcement agencies have traffic units, and state police, they call it the Big Five. They're focusing on the 5 top causing crash factors when they're doing enforcement. I had a nice conversation with the folks from the Fines and Fees Justice Center, and one of the things that, before our meeting, and one of the things that I agree with them on is that technology like photo enforcement or automated enforcement is a stopgap. It's a temporary, to your point, if you leave them there forever in one spot, people avoid that spot, and then you've got a high crash area somewhere else because they're just now going through taking a different route. So it's not the end all be all. It definitely shouldn't become a prop for local, any type of revenue for local jurisdiction or state jurisdiction. Is there something, I hope I kind of touched on his concerns, but yes, top crash causing factors are what we would like to see primarily focused on by enforcement.
And Assemblywoman Gallant, I think that is also something, if you'd like, you could put as a recommendation for the committee to consider. I could, see a piece of legislation that directs law enforcement agencies to focus on high crash causing factors, and then allow those localities to determine what those factors are, because I'm sure it would change depending on where you are in the state. But please, if that's something you'd like to discuss further, submit it for us to consider. Do we have any other questions from committee members for the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety? Okay, seeing none, we will let you all go. Mr. Sever, thank you for hanging with us for 2 presentations in a row. Have a great day. Okay, we will now turn to our next agenda item, number 6, which is a presentation by the National Conference of State Legislatures on recent trends in highway safety legislation. We have some folks from NCSL presenting virtually. I believe we have Douglas Schinkel, Miss Annie Kitsch, hopefully I said that correctly, and Mr. Matt Wicks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Chair Harris and Vice Chair Watts and the rest of the committee for having us today. We're thrilled to be here. I'm Annie Kitsch, and you'll hear from me and my colleagues Doug and Matt on some of the latest legislative trends in traffic safety. So for those of you who have not worked with NCSL, I'm having a trouble sharing my screen. So for those of you who have not worked with NCSL or heard of us, we are a nonpartisan membership organization that works with legislators, legislative staff from each state, DC, and the US territories. And we aim to bring our members together on a variety of policy topics, ranging from healthcare policy all the way to transportation. And our team actually focuses on transportation-related policy, which includes topics like transportation funding and finance and traffic safety, which is why we're here today. Resources. We've been fortunate to receive funding from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, as I'll refer to them for the rest of the presentation. We've received funding from NHTSA for over 30 years, which has allowed us to develop resources like our traffic safety legislative database, which you'll see here on the left of the screen. This tracks legislation under 14 different traffic safety topic areas dating back to 2007. So it's a pretty comprehensive resource if you haven't used it. We also publish an annual traffic safety trends report that highlights notable traffic safety legislation from the previous year, and we anticipate that our 2023 report will be published this summer. Additionally, because 911 and emergency medical services play critical roles in the traffic safety space in terms of providing efficient emergency response, NHTSA also funds our work on these topics, and we've been fortunate to be able to host databases, one on 911 legislation, and this tracks legislation throughout all phases of the legislative process. And we were able to publish an EMS database in 2021 that is managed by a colleague in our health program, and this tracks enacted legislation. So now to why we're all here. As some of you may know, and as we've heard today, traffic crashes and fatalities remain near all-time highs nationwide. And these are some of the issues that definitely can contribute or help combat some of those problems. And we definitely want to recognize that these are not, all of the issues pertinent in the traffic safety world. For time's sake, we're just going to cover the 8 on this slide. However, if there are topics that we don't cover that you have questions about, please feel free to ask during Q&A or reach out separately. And I do want to flag that we're highlighting the latest trends in these topics. We aren't necessarily endorsing any of the laws that we discuss. So first, I'm going to cover state distracted driving laws. As we all know, distracted driving continues to hinder roadway safety nationwide, and it's a topic like many others that we continue to hear about in the news. So to address this, states have enacted laws such as handheld phone bans, which prohibits folks from using their phones behind the wheel. Currently, 27 states, you'll see here in navy, and a couple of states in orange have handheld phone bans. Missouri and Alabama are orange because their ban is secondarily enforced. Other states have a variety of texting bans, so you'll see here in this map. We're seeing that some states that have handheld phone bans are considering toughening their bans. Some states currently allow handheld phone use at a temporary stop, such as a red light, or when they're pulled over to the side of the road. And so we're actually seeing that New York is considering extending their ban to temporary stops. So that's kind of an interesting trend that we're seeing this year overall. And so getting into impaired driving, which I know was just discussed with MBX, this is a topic that I receive a good amount of questions on from lawmakers from the various states. And the latest data is showing that as of 2021, at least 31% of all traffic crash fatalities involved alcohol impaired drivers. So that's a pretty staggering, concerning number. So because of this, states are continuing to examine different interventions. And I wanted to flag ignition interlock devices just because I am seeing more states kind of work to revise their interlock laws. For example, currently 31 states and DC require all offenders, including first-time offenders, to install an interlock. And we see maybe 1 or 2 states every few years make that change. So that's something I wanted to point out. And for the of a vehicle, so if a driver tries to blow into the breathalyzer device with a certain amount of alcohol, the vehicle may not start. And other states that don't require all offender laws may require interlocks for high VAC offenders, repeat offenders, or installation may be up to discretion of a judge. In addition to all offender laws, we're also seeing that some states are allowing or requiring certain DUI offenders to install an interlock in order to obtain restricted driving privileges. This may allow them to drive to essential locations like work, while also factoring in public safety. Additionally, I would be remiss to not mention drugged driving. This is a topic that, an issue, I should say, that data is showing that's definitely contributing to the increase in impaired driving cases, not only drug driving, but polysubstance impaired driving. Louisiana, for example, enacted legislation in 2021 that bans smoking or vaping marijuana in a vehicle on a public highway. Additionally, Oregon enacted legislation last year that expanded its list of intoxicants in its DUI statute to include any substance that is capable of impairing a person's ability to safely drive a vehicle. And this is where drugs in their DUI statutes, because in some states, only specific substances may be listed in the law. And so if a driver tests positive for a substance that is not in that list, and this includes alcohol substances, then it may be tricky to charge them with a DUI. So this may not always apply to cannabis, but it's just important to keep in mind and something that the traffic safety community really flags. So speaking of cannabis impaired driving laws, this is a topic that I also receive a good number of questions about, just because, as we know, several states are considering legalizing adult use cannabis, or they've already legalized and they're looking to evaluate the impacts of cannabis impaired driving on roadway safety. There are currently a few different approaches to these laws. 12 states currently have zero tolerance laws, which means that it's illegal to drive with any amount of THC in a person's system. 5 states, Nevada included, have per se laws, which means that once a person is shown to have reached or legal limit, then that person is considered impaired by law. And I wanted to point out here that Nevada passed a law, as some of you may know, in 2021 that revised the per se law so that it only applies for felony DUI violations. And felony DUI violations often constitute a DUI incident where the driver maybe had repeat offenses or the crash resulted in serious injury or death. And the other states that are grayed out, drivers who are caught driving under the influence of cannabis are usually convicted under the state's general DUI statute. And lastly, I know we've talked a little bit about seatbelt laws. However, I'm just going to highlight child passenger safety here. Currently, there are 19 states and DC that require children younger than 2 to be rear facing in a car seat or until they meet the height and weight recommendations from the manufacturer. And so I'm seeing '21, followed by Maryland, Hawaii, and New Hampshire. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Matt and just slide the laptop over. So that's what you'll be seeing.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Annie. So my name is Matt. For this portion of the presentation, I'll be covering legislative trends in 3 areas of automated enforcement, and we'll be briefly looking at legislative.
So we've lost your screen. And it looks like you're now muted and possibly frozen.
Stop sharing.
Oh, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, yes, but...
No, let's try this.
Okay, give it a shot.
Can you hear us and see us?
Are we back?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. You know, technology, right?
That's right. Please continue.
All right. All right. I'm not sure what the last thing I heard was said, so I'll just pick up where I left off before I think we got cut off. What I was speaking on was that this portion of the presentation is going to cover legislative trends in 3 different areas of automated enforcement NCSL has been seeing. And then we're going to be looking at speeding, aggressive driving, and street exhibition trends in general. Then I'll pass it on over to my colleague Doug to wrap things up. So first, and here on your screen, you can see red light cameras. So we're going to be looking at legislative trends for automated systems that capture motorists running red lights. Running red lights is a problem. In 2021, IHS found that over 1,000 people were killed in red light crashes nationwide. And in response to these red light crash fatalities, we've been seeing states authorizing the use of more red light cameras in specific areas. As you can see, New York and Connecticut in 2023 passed red light automated enforcement related bills. And then in Hawaii began theirs several years ago, a pilot program. It's important to know that states take slightly different approaches to the fine points in their legislation specifically. For example, states have different caps and sets on what fines look like running red lights, as well as different approaches to whether the first time is considered a warning or if it's considered a citation specifically. So the second area of automated enforcement trends we're going to be looking at is for speed cameras. So these are automated systems that issue citations to motorists for excessively exceeding speed limits. As we heard previously, in general, these citations are not being given to motorists going 1 to 2 miles per hour over speed limit. These citations are being given to motorists going 10 miles per hour or over a specific speed limit. The trend we are seeing is that more states are authorizing the use of speed camera automated systems each year. And we're seeing two common areas where the permitted use of these cameras is being implemented. The first is in major metropolitan areas. In 2023, California and Pennsylvania actually permitted these speed enforcement systems in major highways or at major intersections within city limits. And then the second general area where we're seeing this more commonly used is in school zones. Just this past year in 2023, Florida actually enacted a bill permitting local governments to utilize speed cameras in the school zone specifically. The third area we're looking at for automated enforcement is work zone cameras specifically. So these are going to be trends that look at automated systems that capture speed violations in work zones. Work zones commonly are known as construction sites. Currently, 13 states permit the use of automated system speed cameras in work zones, and the trends increases. In 2023, Indiana, Delaware, and Washington all enacted work zone speed camera systems to be used. And one thing that's also to note is some states, but not all, actually begin with a pilot program first. Pennsylvania actually just concluded a 5-year pilot program, and they found post-implementation a reduction in speeding in general. And they also found that in the instances when a speed enforcement vehicle was present capturing speed violations, there was a 50% reduction in work zone crashes. So some interesting results from the Pennsylvania pilot that they ran. So that actually wraps up our automated enforcement trends section of the presentation. These next two slides we'll go through rather quickly, but this is looking at general trends in speeding and speed limits, and then aggressive driving and street exhibitions. So speeding and speed limits is a big problem. It has been for a while, for well over a decade. In 2011, AAA actually worked on a study that found small increases in speed actually can lead to significantly higher risks of death for pedestrians. And as we all know, since the COVID-19 pandemic, this has gotten significantly worse. In response to this, we've seen states take two general approaches regarding speed limits. The first is that some states have authorized local governments to lower speed limits roadways or portions of highways within their jurisdiction. For example, Oregon in 2023 permitted cities to specifically lower their speed limits 10 miles per hour on designated highways within their jurisdiction, lower than the statutory speed specifically. The other general trend we've been seeing is regarding move-over laws, which was a pretty common legislation in 2023. It's important to note all states had move-over laws, and what we saw in 2023 was at least 10 states look at their move-over laws and more specifically take action on further defining circumstances when a motorist must move over and or slow down when either approaching a vehicle on the right-hand side of the road or being approached by an emergency vehicle from behind. So this next slide, what we're going to be looking at is aggressive driving and street exhibitions. Since the pandemic, this has also become a big issue, which is a trend within itself, I suppose. In 2023, 9 states enacted legislation either addressing aggressive driving or street exhibitions. Looking at aggressive driving specifically, we've seen a trend that states have been increasing their penalties for aggressive driving, jail or prison time, or even including circumstances where a vehicle in aggressive driving scenarios could be impounded. And it's important to note that these same penalties could actually apply to street exhibitions as well. Just that we have a common definition of street exhibitions, these are generally going to be street races, burnouts, donuts, general stunts. And the trend we've been seeing is that states have expanded these definitions further to be more all-encompassing. A second trend within street exhibitions we've seen states take is that they have expanded the applicability of these penalties for individuals not just behind the motor vehicle, not behind the wheel of the motor vehicle used in street exhibitions, but for people who help organize these exhibitions, for people who help physically set up and block roadways in these exhibitions. And in a few cases, even the people who gamble or place bets on these street exhibitions in general. So that wraps up my portion of the presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand it on over to my colleague, Doug, to take us on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks a lot, Matt and Annie. Thanks, Chair Harris and Vice Chair Watts for having us today. I directed a transportation program and worked with Nevada a lot over the years, so appreciative to be here. I'm going to wrap up by talking about school bus safety and bicyclist safety, and then I'll share a couple upcoming NCSL programming activities related to traffic safety that may be of interest. So I know there was quite a bit of discussion already about school bus stop arm cameras. I think it's probably first important to preface that school buses are indeed by far statistically the safest way to get school children to and from school. However, as kind of been acknowledged in the discussion, they're most vulnerable, of course, when getting on and off the school bus. And you might, and every state has a law requiring a motorist to stop when a school bus is stopped and discharging or letting on passengers. You might be surprised to realize how prevalent illegally passing a school bus is, as someone was saying during the discussion, that people kind of know they're doing something wrong when they pass a stopped school bus. It's a pretty obviously dangerous activity. There's a annual survey that's done with school bus drivers across the country, and the 2023 survey had 95,000 school bus drivers from 33 states participating, and they reported almost 63,000 instances of an illegal passing of a school bus in a single day during that survey. So that just, you extrapolate that over, 180 or 90 school days throughout the year. And that's not even every state and, every instance, but it gives you a sense that this happens, perhaps more than folks think it does. So as you can see from this, this slide kind of shows two of the main school bus safety interventions. The second one, seat belts, I'm not going to talk about too much because Nevada is actually one of the few states that has a law in place to require that eventually, as the fleet turns over, that seat belts are added to school buses. But really just to mention that, 25 states have these laws authorizing a local government or a school district to use school bus stop arm cameras. This is very significant that half of the United States have these, given all the qualms and about automated enforcement. I would say that it's been very striking the degree to which states are willing to adopt this kind of automated enforcement, and also in work zones, as was mentioned earlier, but have a little more hesitancy towards red light cameras and speed cameras more generally, although that hesitancy is perhaps decreasing a little bit. Generally, these laws just authorize school districts or local governments to use these systems, and the school districts are usually on the hook to fund them themselves. Although there have been states like Wyoming and Minnesota are two examples where they have put in some funds to help get these systems put in place. But I want to be conscious of time. So the last thing I want to talk about is bicyclist safety and bicycle safety stops, which I saw was perhaps a new state policy action priority for the NV Acts group. So as was kind of mentioned during the conversation, vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and bicyclists are really bearing a disproportionate brunt of the increased fatality and crash rates across the country. Bicyclists and pedestrian death rates from crashes are at or near all-time highs nationwide, and in many individual states. So one trend we've seen from states is the enactment of what's called a bicycle safety stop law. It's also known as an Idaho stop law because Idaho has had such a law in place since the late 1970s. No other state had such a law until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then a bunch of states, or not a bunch, but we now have 10 that slowly started to look at these and enact these. So these laws essentially allow a bicyclist to treat a stop sign as a yield sign. And you'll see there's 4 states where they go even further, and this law applies to a stoplight, where you have to stop at a stoplight, but then you can proceed if it's clear. And that is the key with both of these. Bicyclists don't have they don't have anything around them protecting them, so they're not going to proceed through an intersection unless that it's safe for them to do so. They still must yield, and in some of the states they do have some language about how kind of a speed that you have to reduce to when doing so. You may ask, some folks may wonder, like, well, why is this a safety matter? This seems unsafe, and that maybe perception does make a certain degree of sense. The research does find, though, that these laws allow cyclists to mitigate risks to their advantage, increase their visibility to drivers, and reduce exposure. A lot of that is just around them. If they see that it's safe to get through an intersection, to get through an intersection quickly, because that's one of the most, that's, an area where there tends to be more conflicts. These laws also decriminalize a riding behavior, which may lead to more people bicycling. And there is a concept referred to as safety in numbers, and a lot of research backing it up, that the more pedestrians and bicyclists you have in a transportation system, the more likely that motorists will adjust their behaviors accordingly, because they're aware that there are those vulnerable users out there. If you only see a vulnerable road user every once in a while, you kind of you drive differently and aren't as safe. And I think you can think of any environment in your communities where there's a lot more pedestrians or bicyclists. You tend to probably adjust your driving a little bit more. The one other thing I'd mention, because we could go in a lot of things with vulnerable road users and don't have enough time to share, but generally, we're seeing a trend towards more states dedicating more funding for infrastructure to physically separate bicyclists, pedestrians, people using wheelchairs, and other vulnerable road users. Some states, like Washington State's a good example, California is another example, they actually have an active transportation division within their state DOT. And what the division, for example, does in Washington is it works to focus state and federal funding from Washington's pedestrian and bicycle program and their Safe Routes to School program toward projects in areas of the state with the highest need and potential for success. I would also just mention that in general, that many of the interventions that Matt and Annie talked about are very relevant to vulnerable road users, reducing impaired driving and distracted driving and aggressive driving, and particularly reducing speeds. But there is a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, increasing visibility at intersections, better crossings, physically separating scooter riders and bicyclists on bike lanes, rather than just having a stripe of paint, having actually something physical to separate them. And with that, that kind of concludes the policy part of the conversation. I do want to mention that we have an upcoming traffic safety webinar. We will make sure to send all this information to the committee staff. This webinar will have some NHTSA speakers speaking about national crash fatality trends, and then some of the opportunities to collaborate with the federal government and also access federal grant funding, of which there's a lot from the IIJA around traffic safety. And then a presentation from Annie and Matt and I that will largely be along these lines, but updated a little bit. I also want to, of course, just put in a quick plug. Our 2024 Legislative Summit is in Louisville, Kentucky this summer. And if you want to learn and network with your legislative peers from across the country on traffic safety and transportation issues, but just generally on any state policy topic under the sun, I would strongly encourage you to attend. And I just want to mention that we will indeed actually be holding a traffic safety pre-conference the day before our legislative summit begins. We will plan on inviting Chair Harris and Vice Chair Watts, as well as Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. But also, this is open to anyone who's attending summit. So if you're interested, we'll send information. But we hope that you can join us, because we will be talking about many of these topics that have been discussed today, and talking about what has not worked in states, what kind of public communication strategies, what kind of political strategies are necessary to get some of these policies over the finish line. So with that, I just want to share our contact information, and we're happy to answer questions. I think we'll have Annie and I mostly answer questions, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here and for providing a breadth and depth of information that you all always do. Do committee members have any questions for our NCSL presenters? Okay, that means you did such a great job that no one needs any more information from you at this point. So thank you all so much for coming. Committee members, please feel free to reach out to NCSL for additional information, or if you're interested in attending any one of those events. Thank you guys so much. We'll go ahead and close out that agenda item. Have a great day. And open up agenda item number 7, which is a presentation on automated traffic enforcement by the Fines and Fees Justice Center. We have Ms. Mosley and Mr. Shepak here. Welcome. Thank you for being here in Carson with me. Please feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Chair Harris. Speed cameras, red light cameras. These technologies may actually not be the solution to the problem of traffic fatalities in the state of Nevada. Good afternoon, Chair Harris, Vice Chair Watts, committee members, and staff. I am Lisa Mosley. First name is spelled L-E-I-S-A, last name M-O-S-E-L-E-Y. And since I got married a year and a half ago, the addition of Sales, S-A-Y-L-E-S. I am the Nevada State Director for the Fines and Fees Justice Center. I want to thank you for the opportunity, for reaching out to us and offering us the opportunity to present to you today and share some information and our position on automated traffic enforcement, particularly red light cameras and speed cameras. I am joined by our fabulous Deputy State Director, Mr. Nick Shepak, who you will hear from later. He has put together a really good presentation and some solid recommendations from our organization. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the other presenters and to say thank you to them for their work and diligence on studying this issue and willingness to collaborate. It's very important to us that our streets and our roads are safe. Now, we at FFJC have significant concerns about the use of red light cameras and speed cameras. And one of our major concerns is whether they actually work. There is limited data to support the claim that these cameras significantly enhance road safety. In fact, we have data that shows we have an analysis of multiple studies, not just one study, but analysis of multiple studies on red light cameras. And what we found is that although there is some evidence that these red light cameras may reduce some types of crashes, particularly T-bone crashes, this evidence, the effect was not significant. In fact, some of these studies show that some crashes, such as rear-end crashes, have actually increased. Mr. Shepak will talk more about that in his part of the presentation. We are also deeply concerned that these cameras can too easily become revenue generators, because in reality, they serve as significant sources of revenue for both the municipalities that employ them, as well as the vendors that manufacture and install them. In fact, they have been known to generate millions of dollars annually in fine and fee revenue from citations and through contract stipulations between vendors and municipalities. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. This body and the proponents of these tools must ask the question, what is the goal that we are trying to achieve with red light cameras? And I think through previous presentations and questions from legislators, that answer has become evident, and that is to eliminate traffic fatalities or reduce them significantly. Well, if that's the answer, then the structure and function of Nevada's streets and roads must be brought in line with a goal through infrastructure investments. Investments in traffic calming measures such as speed humps, raised sidewalks, traffic circles, just to name a few. And though we at FFJC are not experts in traffic safety, we have extensively researched this issue and the use of automated traffic enforcement tools, including red light and speed cameras. The research shows that they are not always the solution and that the best way to reduce traffic fatalities is to fix the underlying road infrastructure problems that contribute to unsafe driving. Two great examples of this, Hoboken, New Jersey, and Jersey City, New Jersey. Both of the cities have achieved the goal of 0 fatalities without the use of speed cameras or red light cameras. A quick note about Hoboken. It is the only city in America that has achieved 7 consecutive years without a traffic death. This was achieved through systematic safety and infrastructure improvements such as installing roundabouts, reflective pillars at entrances to crosswalks, things like that. And I should know that, like Nevada, New Jersey currently prohibits the use of red light or speed cameras. We at the Fines and Fees Justice Center are just as concerned about the number of fatalities and crashes on Nevada's roads and streets attributed to speeding, distracted drivers, particularly in school zones. I currently have a 16-year-old in Clark County School District who takes the bus. So I am personally concerned about that. But it would seem more effective in these cases that having mechanisms in place that slow drivers down immediately rather than a delayed citation in the mail seems like that would be more effective. We are equally concerned about the undeniable harms to residents that inevitably result from the use of these technologies. ATE programs draw more people into the criminal legal system and are known to exacerbate poverty, to perpetuate racial disparities, and financially devastate communities, particularly communities of color. Enforcement does nothing to solve that problem. This body must examine these technologies closely and continue to research them. You must weigh the benefits of these technologies against the harms that they cause to communities and decide whether the benefits outweigh the harm. I will turn it over to Deputy Director Nick Shepak, so you get to hear from him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. My name is Nick Shepak, Nickshepak, and as mentioned, I am the State Deputy Director of the Fines and Fees Justice Center. Fines and Fees Justice Center has been studying this issue for multiple years, and we have created guidance for states that are either have this on the books where they're allowing ATE, or states that may be considering it. The current state of ATE in Nevada is we have a ban. It was banned in 1999. It was a bipartisan bill that passed the Senate with only 2 no votes, and it passed the Assembly unanimously. I encourage everyone to go back to the legislative history. Much of the same concerns we have today were discussed during those hearings when this bill passed. So, 22 states do not allow ATE, including very diverse group of states, including Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, Maryland, Maine, New Jersey. 3 states allow only speed cameras, while another 2 states only allow red light cameras. So in order to understand how we got to our recommendations, it's very important to understand the concerns that we found when researching this topic. So, as mentioned, studies on the effectiveness are mixed. A 2020 meta-analysis of 37 independent studies on red light cameras found that there was no significant effect. The National Association on Traffic Safety Administration notes that while speed cameras do actually have some impact on safety, they are never a solution and only should be used appropriately as part of a broader strategy. They're an after-the-fact punishment. We live in a state where people visit. It's one of our main sources of our economy. People who visit will not receive a ticket, will not receive an interaction with law enforcement until months, or possibly weeks or a month later. This does not lead to direct behavior change. Same thing for anyone who drives through a school zone. We want people to drive through a school zone slow the first time, not get a ticket 3 weeks later. We don't want a child hit in a school zone and then a ticket sent to that individual. So the after-the-fact punishment that comes with ATE is of concern. They fail to address infrastructure needs. What we have seen is that years and years of fine-based enforcement trying to address road safety has just not worked. Traffic fatalities are up across the country, and just increasing what we're doing has not proven to be an effective strategy, as where infrastructure investment very much has. Many jurisdictions currently operate more automated traffic enforcement tools than ever before, and many of those jurisdictions continue to see a rise in traffic injuries and traffic fatalities. They draw a significantly more people into the system than regular enforcement. A couple examples. Between October 2020 and March 2021 in the District of Columbia, ATE issued a total of 666,686 tickets. That is almost as many tickets as there are residents in D.C. And if you look at fatalities in D.C., in 2022, there was 35 traffic fatalities. In 2023, there was 52 even with the increased use. And if you go back from 2012 to 2016, there was under 30. So while there may be some safety impacts in a city that has chosen to use this enforcement, we are still seeing a rise in fatalities very similar to what we're seeing here in Nevada. When Chicago chose to decrease the threshold from 10 miles an hour over to 6 miles an hour over in their speed enforcement cameras, they issued more than 2 million tickets. That is more than there are residents in the city of Chicago. Increased fines exacerbate poverty. The U.S. Department of Transportation calls flat fee tickets an aggressive scheme. Tickets may be a slight inconvenience to those who have the means. However, to a poorer family, a ticket can be absolutely devastating financially. What we know from recent research is that if faced with an unexpected $400 expense, 37% of adults would be able to pay that expense with current cash or savings, meaning they would need to borrow money from a friend or seek other relief. And low-income individuals are more likely to share cars with their families. And since these cameras do not ticket drivers, they ticket owners of vehicles, we increase the likelihood that the lowest income individuals receive a higher number of tickets. ATE creates perverse incentives. Even if revenue is intended for worthy public projects, government reliance on it entrenches profits over safety. We have seen this in community after community. Even when revenue is directed directly to traffic-related improvements, funding to increase safety is only sustainable if new or ongoing ways to issue fine-based traffic violations can be found. Racial disparities are also exacerbated. Researchers in DC found that drivers in one of the city's predominantly black areas was over 17 times more likely to receive a violation at a cost of 16 times more per resident. The historical lack of investment in these communities, especially in infrastructure, leads to more dangerous streets, leads to high impact areas, leads to places where these cameras tend to be placed, and leads to higher level of tickets in these areas. These areas also have the highest number of people that rely on walking and bicycles in order to get to and from work, the store, and other places. And cameras don't always get it right. Red light and speed cameras are far from error-free. In fact, in Baltimore, traffic cameras were found to have an error rate of more than 10%, leading to as many as 70,000 unjustified tickets issued in that city alone. There's also a myth that ATE has a significant positive impact on the interaction between police and residents. You could set up an ATE system where you reduce traffic enforcement and use the cameras instead. However, as we learned today, some of our biggest concerns on the roads are aggressive driving, they are DUIs and impaired driving, and you need a robust traffic enforcement in order to capture that. Sending a ticket to somebody who is drag racing is not the same as citing them for this type of racing. So the true solution if one of the things we're looking at is reducing interactions between law enforcement and the communities, is to talk about legislation, as we did last session, that would prioritize dangerous driving stops and make certain offenses secondary offenses. So understanding those concerns, and due to the prevalence and potential harms of ATE across the country, the Fines and Fees Justice Center has developed guidance to mitigate these harms. First off is if ATE is used at all, it should be temporary. So what we mean by this, and what we see in certain places like the new legislation in California, is ATE is used with certain goals in mind, including infrastructure changes as a very temporary solution. You prioritize non-financial sanctions. This can be warnings, driver education, driver safety training, instead of tickets. In extreme cases, develop graduated responses based on the frequency and severity of behavior. So we suggest that the first offense is a warning. The second offense is a smaller fine. You graduate these sanctions up, so you target people who have bad driving behavior that continues instead of a blanket punishment across the board. Ensure fines are proportionate to an individual's ability to pay. This includes a robust and well-functioning ability to pay system. If you are going to implement a new system that is going to capture millions of more people a year, especially in certain communities, there needs to be a way that the state takes the income of the individual receiving the ticket into account, and it cannot be overburdensome for the individuals who are receiving these tickets. Do not use ATE with the goal of raising revenue. Use revenue as one-time and discretionary expenses, and do not allow added fees or surcharges or penalties or interest on these fines. And those added fees include things like the administrative assessment that goes to the general fund. If we implement this and allow the administrative assessment to be on these tickets, it will be hard for the state to ever give up that revenue. Investment in street design, engineering, and infrastructure before adding or increasing enforcement. As mentioned, Hoboken and Jersey City have both reached their Vision Zero goals without the use of ATE. Now, sometimes when we talk about infrastructure, we think of these high-cost projects that really disrupt traffic, like putting in new roundabouts, which they did in Hoboken and Jersey City. But the main parts of their infrastructure investments were high visibility crosswalks, plastic pillars that have reflectors on it. They increased the use of four-way stops instead of two-way stops. Really low-cost infrastructure investment that has seen extremely significant impacts. And develop clear and consistent policies for determining whether ATE technology captures a true violation and how it should be sanctioned. So this includes mandatory human review of all violations and clear metrics on whether or not these cameras are effective. And if we're not meeting those metrics, those cameras need to be pulled. Just because you're getting a lot of speeding citations, if you're not actually seeing a reduction in speeding, crashes, or fatalities, these cameras need to be removed, and we need to be looking for better options. We also went through contracts from across the country with ATE companies. These companies tend to be for-profit companies. Their goal is revenue for themselves. And so we have highlighted some of the red flags that we have found inside of these contracts. Everything that you will hear is in an existing contract. So ATE, you have to prohibit vendors from making site recommendations based on their own analysis of locations. These for-profit vendors are not safety experts. Your departments of transportation, your local cities and counties are much better poised to make the decisions of where these cameras need to be than the vendors. All contracts should expressly prohibit ATE vendors from changing the lengths of yellow lights. In places that they have allowed ATE vendors to reduce yellow lights, they have seen a massive increase in red light running and huge revenues. The times that yellow lights exist need to be set by state, city, and county. Ensure your ATE contracts explicitly define how violations will be determined. And this is paying special attention to the need for human review and not allowing the ATE companies to solely review these violations. And we also warn of vendors that include collection services in their contracts. While this often brings down the price of the contract to the state or municipality, that cost is passed directly on to the individual who's receiving the ticket and results in more wealth extraction from communities. Avoid contracts that pay vendors per citation. This also often results in cheaper contracts for states and municipalities. However, it creates the perverse incentive for vendors to get as many citations as possible instead of focusing on actually addressing safety needs. Avoid agreements that allow ATE vendors to add supplemental fees. Not only do we need to ensure that the state or the municipalities do not add fees onto these citations, many contracts allow the vendors to add fees on the back end, increasing the price of the tickets, again extracting wealth from these communities. And never grant private ATE vendors the power to set the terms of enforcement or prosecution. This may seem like a no-brainer. However, there are ATE contracts that exist in America today where the terms of enforcement and the right to prosecute individuals who have violated are given directly to these private companies. Now, I agree with Senator Daley that I am not happy to talk about California here. However, California is the only state who has passed legislation, and it was very recent in 2023, that addresses many of our concerns when talking about ATE. California has started a pilot program in 5 cities that meet specific requirements. These cities are both large, such as LA, and some much smaller cities. These are only for speed cameras. They have strict requirements that speed cameras in school zones are only during hours in which school children are present. So that's a certain time before and after school and during. They establish no fines or establish fines, but there's no fees added, and there's a mandatory reduction for low-income drivers. Revenue from citations goes directly to street calming infrastructure with the goal of removing the cameras. They have strict requirements for these vendor contracts written into the law. They have strong due process and privacy protections for people cited. And they have mandatory review for efficacy and equity with strict metrics. If metrics are not met once these cameras are added, they are removed in quick order because they are not producing the safety results that they were set out to prove. For the pilot programs, such as they have, there's a few must-haves, such as adopting a speed, safety, and use policy, and impact reports, and strong engagement with the communities. All the communities that will be receiving these pilot program cameras have the ability to have public input. They know where these cameras are going to be. They know all the terms around these cameras, and they have to have community buy-in in order to install these. Detailed public information campaign prior to the start of pilots. As was talked about earlier, this cannot be a hide and seek. These should be highly visible, and the public should be very aware that this pilot program is going into effect. They issue warnings for the first 60 days that the cameras are in effect with no citations, giving people time to adjust. And after 60 days, the first offenses for speeding of 11 to 15 miles over are also limited to warnings.
Mr. Shepak, how many more slides
This
do
is
you
the last
have?
one. We're done. We're done.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And so we end with the recommendations for the committee.
Lisa Mosley Sales, for the record. Very briefly, specifically identify the problem that we are trying to solve. We already discussed that. And determine the most effective evidence-based approach to addressing the problem. I think all of us here, including previous presenters, committee members all agree. And if ATE appears to be a solution, to study it like we are doing now, continue to study it and monitor it. And also, wait for what California has to say, since they are the only state that has legislation regarding this. Let's wait and see what their programs look like. Let's wait and see what the data shows coming from California. Thank you. We will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Committee members, do we have questions for the Fines and Fees Justice Center on their presentation and recommendations? Okay, benefits of going, 7th on the agenda. Yeah. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. I'm sure further discussions will continue. Okay, we'll go ahead and close out that agenda item and open up agenda item 8, which is a presentation by the Nevada Department of Transportation on its programs and plans. We have Miss Tracy Thomason. Miss Larkin Thomason, who is the director, and I believe we also have Miss Felicia Denny, the assistant director, and Nicholas Johnson, who is the chief of the Division of Project Management. See, you were trying to hide. Welcome. Please go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Hello, I'm Tracy Larkin Thomason. I'm the director of the Nevada Department of Transportation, and as you already stated, I have with me Felicia Denny and Nick Johnson. I will tell you in advance, I also, in the South, for any questions later, I have Sarah Watterson, who is the president of Brightline, so on that, to answer any questions there. I have put a lot of information on each of the slides. I will not read that, but it is so for any of you, it will give you more details about the projects than I plan to talk about. And I promised 20 minutes, so I may talk fast. First, we'll start with the overview. Just a reminder, we have 3 districts around the state. We have 3 major divisions: administration and planning, project delivery, and operations and maintenance. We have approximately 1,981 people around the state. I'm going to talk about current major projects. One of the big ones, of course, is I-15 in Tropicana in southern Nevada. The details are on there, but also we made it through the Formula One and Super Bowl, and our biggest success there was we were not in the news, and we appreciated that very much. In the north, we have the US 395 North Valleys project. This is Phase 1B. 1A was the Parr Boulevard Bridge, and there'll be one more phase after this that we've already received a grant, so we are moving in phases to relieve the traffic up there. The US 395 Pyramid Highway Connector is in Phase 1. It is well underway. It's widening the Pyramid Connector, and then also it will be completed next year. The I-515 Charleston Boulevard. It is, this was an alternate delivery project using CMAR, construction method at risk. It is a $75 million project. It will actually be completed at the end of this year. So it's been a multi-year project, but some of those orange cones will disappear in that area. On the I-15 North Phase 3, this is the intersection that goes up from North Las Vegas up to the intersection with US 95. It was a $72 million construction contract that widened the freeway, and it will be complete at the end of this year. We'll be looking in the fourth quarter. The I-15 Sloan to Warm Springs. This started in January 2024 of this year and is anticipated completion at the end of next year. And then upcoming major projects. So everything I've talked about now is fully underway and hopefully complete soon. We'll be looking at starting the Ely Downtown Improvement Project, Phase 2. On this one, it is about a $50 million construction one, but we did receive a $24 million grant from RAISE and another $5 million in earmark, so that covers well over half of the project. We will be coming up soon. We've heard some references to Henderson before, and the Henderson Interchange. This is an alternate design build. Most of the information is on the next slide. We are in the phase of the RFP out. All the submittals are due at the end of April. We will be looking at awarding in midsummer. It's a multi-year project, and it should probably go before the Transportation Board for award in the July timeframe. Then also we have, this was with a grant that we were worked with RTC of Southern Nevada, also the Nevada State Patrol and UNLV. This is on the Advanced Transportation Congestion Management Technology. These are like your overhead signs, things that go along that help manage the traffic. So if you're in Las Vegas, if you've seen those big overhead signs with the green X's and so on like that, they'll be seeing some more of those. The next page kind of shows also like wrong way driver systems, which are effective in about 84% of them putting up. So that's very good. That's a very high percentage there. And just some also posted messages in law enforcement. So we just looked around to see where they should be placed. And then as we're looking into the future, so what I've told you is what's actively going, what's coming up soon, and now what we're looking at in future years. The Project Neon Phase 2. This is basically the reconstruction of the Sahara interchange in southern Nevada. It is looking at final design now, and we were looking at construction in 2026. The Reno Spaghetti Bowl Phase 2. It is currently going through design and right-of-way, looking at the different right-of-way and the final design. It is in the range, it is from about $400 to $600 million. It's like I said, we're looking at the alignment in the right-of-way. This is basically 2.5 miles from the Spaghetti Bowl out to East McCarran. Then there's the I-80 West Reno and Verdi Bridge replacements. We do have special federal bridge funding for this to put out there. These are two separate projects that ultimately will replace almost 15 different structures. They're just reaching the end of their design life, but I do not mean to imply they are unsafe at all. But it is just time to go through and start working on them. Other studies that we're looking at to look at future projects is we have the I-80 East widening. We are in the middle of NEPA, that's the environmental review. It should be completed next year, and then we will start looking at final design. It will definitely be a phased project. It comes out from the east side of Vista, so the east side of Reno, and goes out to the intersection with USA Parkway. On Sahara to Flamingo. So this is the I-15 Central Corridor. Again, I said Sahara to Flamingo. It goes down from looking at the I-15 from Oki to about the SR intersection with SR 215. And this is really looking for safety evaluations, for optimizing safety and travel reliability. So, and reviewing the interchanges. So how can we best get the traveling public through there more reliably and safer? The I-15 State Line to Sloan feasibility study. I may actually be ahead of my schedule if I keep talking this fast. I-15 State Line to Sloan feasibility study. This is really looking at all the impacts along from the state line up to Sloan. We know that, we're looking at having Brightline in the center line over there. We're looking at the impacts of the future airport, Ivanpah. We're looking at proposed interchanges and growth from the city of Henderson and Clark County. So really just taking a hard look at how best to incorporate them and keep the I-15 moving. The SR 613, also known as Summerlin Highway, we began a NEPA study. Again, we're really looking at safety, redoing some of the interchanges like Durango there, and mobility. So how can we improve that corridor there? US 95. This is the extension of, as we're looking from the edge of Kyle Canyon up through Indian Springs up to Mercury. That is the next section of I-11, and we're looking at what it needs to take to raise the US 95 up to interstate standards. And that means control of access, restricted access, and just, like I said, what we need to do to upgrade that one. Brightline West. So on this one, we kept it pretty short and straightforward, basically just looking at on Brightline, what they're looking at is they're securing the remaining funding, completing the administrative actions, and they're working on the design and putting it through. NDOT is really focused on working with FRA. We have ongoing meetings with them on a regular basis into the grant agreement, and then we're also looking at the subrecipient agreement that's with Brightline. So that we have joint meetings between Brightline, FRA, and NDOT. And we're also getting the right-of-way occupancy permit, which is the vehicle of which will be in the median on there. So we're looking at the conditions for that. And then we're looking at construction augmentation RFP going out later this year. So challenges. So now I've pretty well gone through the projects. And I am talking faster than I thought. That's good. So the highway fund revenue resources. So this is what is coming in what came in FY federal year 2023. We basically had about $1.3 billion state highway fund revenue that came in. And I also remind people that we also, some of this funding also goes to the Department of Public Safety and also to the Department of Motor Vehicles. The majority of this is about half, the state highway fund is about half of our revenue for the department, and the other part for us is federal highway funds. So it's, not quite, but it's close to a 50-50 split. On the next slide, it shows our expenditures, which was $1.4 billion. You may note that that's a higher expenditure than there is the income coming in, so that will be one of our challenges. So as you go through, NDOT uses approximately 75%, just under. DMV has a 11.2%, DPS has about 6%, and then there's another about $44.5 million that is, it's about 3.2%, but that covers things like core NV, bond debt, the Governor's Finance Office, so that's where some of that other funding goes. The smaller circle to the right shows basically the breakdown of Nevada DOT's area. So our construction administration and maintenance and what we use in each of those areas. The next slide shows the inflation, what's coming in, and this is definitely an impact to our program. As you can see this is also from this is the National Highway Construction Cost Index, so that's the basis for this comes from. But if you look at it going from 2003 to 2023, you can see in the last 2-3 years that just the cost of the materials that we're using, in particular asphalt-based things, concrete and steel. So those are three products that are highly used on most of our almost any of our projects there. So it is definitely impacting our estimates. It's just costing more to put out the same project. The next slide kind of gives comparisons of how the highway fund over the several years. I find it easier to look at the right-hand side of the slide. If you look at the 20-year average, basically the highway fund revenue has gone up 3.5%, but the construction inflation has been just under 10%, not 9.7. The next one is how much is per year. It's just an average year. So a single year in there, it says 2.5%, and then the inflation was 17.2. But if you look at the last 3 years, the total part basically was we went up 7.8% in income, in revenue, and we went up 51.5% in costs. That inflation, like I said, we are slowing down some projects and really looking very hard at the projects we're putting out to make sure, just as they come in higher, projects fall off the list. And when I say fall off the list, they are delayed. They don't necessarily fall off the list. With that challenge going in there, to talk a little bit about staff vacancies, I want to say like I said, we have 1,951 full-time positions. We have 402 vacancies. We're actually at 20.7%. On a bright note, last year we were at 26%. So we are headed in the right direction. And like DMV, I also would like to thank the legislature for the salary increases. That is definitely helping. There is a little bit more retention. We have some of the same problems as other state agencies where we can attract the people, we can't necessarily retain them for a great time. I did break underneath there between the districts in the Las Vegas and Tonopah, because you're going to see different challenges around the state. If you look at Tonopah, it's almost a 30% vacancy. We cannot get professional engineers in the rural areas there, but it also competes with the mines. So we're trying to really look at what what the real challenges are in the areas. If you look in the Reno, actually the Reno area itself, the Reno Sparks Carson, we have a higher vacancy again, particularly with the professional areas, engineers, but we're competing with local agencies there. But in the rural areas, we're actually doing quite well, like Fallon, Fernley, Fallon, Lovelock, actually pretty stable. We're actually working for a state agency it's a really solid job in those communities. In District 3, it's a little bit there, the 15 and 16% in Elko and Ely, it's still high, but Winnemucca competes directly with the mines. So we have more trouble there. Again, in that whole area, the rural areas, we do have trouble getting professional engineers, traffic engineers on there. But when it's directly in the mine with some of the putting in, it's a much different salary base than what we pay with the state. On the undersigned positions, I listed them primarily. The one I was going to star is a little bit on seasonal help. We used to hire up to 50 people in both the summer season and the winter season. And we used to turn away people. We now are lucky if we can get between 5 and 10. So it does impact some of the snow removal activities across the state, just winter maintenance. The same thing more in the south. We just can't hire the extra people. The next slide is more just a visual representation. The ones that are actually on the map represent the sub-districts that we were talking about here, but it really is, it shows the same data, just more of a visual. The impact that the vacancy have is because we do outsource more. And so this next slide shows the 10-year from 2013 to 2023, the difference of what we're doing for outsourcing. And when I say outsourcing, that's consultants for designing, it's outsourcing for like geotechnical work, it's outsourcing construction, augmentation, and administration. Also, it's also manpower for when we've needed to bring in office support for like accounting, payroll, and training. So we have gone from over the 10 years of looking at about a $40 million part to we're looking at almost $120 million this year. And that impact, that difference is, those are dollars that would normally go towards either services, agreements, or projects. So this is that funding source there. The next slide is just showing the construction crew augmentation. That is a subset of the slide that I just showed. Again, particularly in the last few years, these are the people we hire, to the testers, the inspectors, the people who do the construction augmentation, and the federal reporting on it. So they're necessary for us for the oversight of the project. But again, we're particularly like in Las Vegas, it's very hard to get engineers at it. We are looking, working with the state at looking at the specifications, looking at the credentials needed on those, what is really the correct level, taking a hard look at it. We also do workforce development. We have student internships. That's something we started about 2 legislatures ago, where it's still a fairly new one. COVID kind of had it on pause. But we do look to hire 16 to 18-year-olds on a part-year basis. They can start at 16, they stay in school, and then they can work until 6 months after graduation. It's to introduce them into more of the trades. We're also looking at expanding that one. You may see something later on to do it for the business side. So if high school students want to come in and work in accounting part-time and full-time in the summer, introduce them to the workforce and give them the skill set to move on later. We look at public service interns. These are the college student programs. This is actually a very good program, and it's fairly successful. We have 69 positions we hire. The college students come for the summer, and we actually have like 152 applicants this year. So that's a really good program. Many times they come back for 2 or 3 years. We have rotating engineers. It's a 2-year program that rotates through the department. We also have outreach to kindergarten through 12. Job fairs. We're working with Hope for Prisoners on CDL programs. Also with Workforce Connections in Southern Nevada. We're pairing up with them. And we work with both the AGC and the Nevada Contractors Association. And I think I made my 20-minute mark. So That concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and if I can't answer them, I'm pretty sure I have the people with me that can.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was a lot of information in the perfect amount of time, so thank you so much. I just want to remind committee members, although you all are down south, we do have the folks from Brightline with us in Las Vegas, so if you all do have any questions about that project, please feel free to ask those questions now, and we will bring them up. First on my list, I have Vice Chair Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have two quick questions. One for my colleagues in the Southwest. Saw a lot of great information on ongoing and upcoming major projects. I know there's been a lot of conversation about Blue Diamond and kind of that corridor in the Southwest. So I was just wondering if you have any updates to provide on projects and improvements, particularly on or around that corridor.
We don't have any particular emphasis looking at that area, and I'm double checking, but Blue Diamond is not an NDOT facility, nor is that portion of Las Vegas Boulevard.
I thought the Blue Diamond was a state route, but okay.
I'm sorry?
The other question
excuse me, I am being corrected. That is my fault. So I do not have a study there at this time.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll just reiterate, since I know if some of my other colleagues were on this committee, they would be asking about that, to bump it up. Obviously, we've seen tremendous growth in that area, and again, with that as a state route and a major traffic corridor, I know folks are interested in seeing some upgrades and improvements out there. The other thing that I had, I guess I'll start with the question portion. So I really appreciate the updates on the vacancy rates. Really glad to see that they're going down since our activities in the last legislative session. And you mentioned, I think you spoke really well to some of the issues that we're having in certain rural communities, some of the competition that we're seeing, particularly for some of those engineering positions. I know in the past we've also had conversations about some of the folks that are, and you alluded to some of this as well, are folks that are on the ground, taking care of shoveling snow, other things. We also know that those tend to be some of the lower paid positions within the department doing that on the ground work. What have you seen in terms of vacancy rates in those positions since the action we took last session?
They've been, it's the actions that you did helped really stem people leaving. What we're still seeing, and if you'll look back on slide, the one that lists the state vacancies, as we went around the state, the areas that are in direct competition with some of the mines in there is a lot of, we have a lot of vacancies in those rates. In many cases now, what we're doing is combining crews for larger maintenance projects. We have not, we do look at outsourcing a few things. This is not an area that's easy to outsource in rural areas for regular maintenance, even the snow plowing part. You need to know the roadways, you need to know the equipment. So again, we're also looking, like I said, in Ely, Elko, and Winnemucca. The maintenance positions, other than Winnemucca, are relatively steady. We are seeing a turnover as far as the long-term people are retiring. They've hit their 30 years, which is a testament to their loyalty on the part. They're great rock, salt of the earth people. We have a large of what's coming in now has only been with the department like under 5 years. So what we don't have is that middle level anymore. So we're trying to, that's why we're also really looking at basic training. my staff knows that this year I'm really focusing on back to basics, making sure everybody has full training, making sure they have all the basic training they need to do. Don't rush it, get the foundations in place. We're looking at making sure that we train them appropriately, that they have the time to put on and really learn the equipment. Then we're also looking at the projects that we're putting out around the state, making sure that we're right-sizing the program to the funding that we have and keep it steady for the next couple of years. I'm not sure I answered your question completely.
No, thank you. That is really helpful. And, again, I think both the chair and I had the opportunity to hear about a lot of these issues during the budget presentation and process last session, as well as some of the other members on this committee. And I think we're all committed to continuing to make sure that we make progress in those areas. And so while we're all very happy that we're seeing results from what we did, we know that there are going to still be areas where we need continual improvements. We heard from the Department of Motor Vehicles earlier about some of the things that they're going to be looking at and bringing forward, classification studies, trying to make sure that we get our state employees in a position where they're not also relying on Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I just wanted to check in on some of that. And, again, I just look forward to, to seeing what you bring forward and what the governor puts forward in an upcoming budget to continue to build off the progress we made and really tackle some of those professions where we're either seeing, that the wages are not competitive, for example, in those mining communities with other opportunities, or where the wages simply just aren't livable and aren't attractive enough to get people in the door. So it's great to hear that we've kind of stemmed the bleeding in terms of people leaving. We need to make sure that, as you noted, that we're able to bring people in and start to fill in those early stage and middle stage folks in their careers. So thank you for that.
And I'll just note, Blue Diamond is part of my district. And I know with Brightline coming and potentially setting up their station, I believe like off of Blue Diamond, maybe towards Las Vegas Boulevard area, maybe that provides an opportunity to do a little bit of studying on the traffic on Blue Diamond more generally, as we plan to bring in Brightline. Any adjustments that might need to be made to accommodate for the additional traffic that we might see coming in and out of that facility would only be on top of, right, the kind of growth that's already in that area and the changing traffic patterns that we're seeing because of that growth.
And I will let Sarah Watterson speak to that specifically on there, but I do know that that's what they're working with Clark County on, the permitting part.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, Assemblywoman Brown May has a question or two.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for that presentation. I really appreciate getting into the weeds a little bit. My question is really about vulnerable road users and some of the accessibility that we have or maybe don't have yet. I'm wondering if you could speak to specifically the areas around where you just did the Tropicana piece, so the reconfiguration of Tropicana over the I-15 and then that Flamingo area. So Flamingo is in the middle of my district, and I have a number of folks who want to access by pedestrian bridges or pedestrian ways other resorts outside of Las Vegas Boulevard. And I know on my bicycle, when I take that route, it's very exposed to traffic in that area. I'm curious to know what part of that falls on NDOT as opposed to the county. I understand that there's conflicting authority in that particular area. And then do we have any plans through NDOT to be able to improve accessibility for our vulnerable road users?
Yes. Also, I have with...
if you could state your name for the record.
I actually have been negligent about that. Tracy Larkin Thomason, Director for the Nevada Department of Transportation. Also, we are focusing for vulnerable road users throughout the state. That is a high priority, particularly at intersections. So Tropicana, we do not, our ownership of Tropicana begins at the west side of Las Vegas Boulevard. So we don't own Las Vegas Boulevard in that area. So basically, it's just where the structure itself pretty much starts and just a short piece there. We will, of course, you still have the pedestrian bridges there. We look at the access, working around with the different stadiums and so on like that. And do you have more details on that one?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and committee members. For the record, Nick Johnson, NDOT Project Management. Specifically with the Tropicana interchange, as Director Larkin was saying, that our ownership is really the interchange itself. To the west is the county, and then as you get down to Las Vegas Boulevard, the county as well. But as part of that project, and I think as maybe you alluded to with the pedestrians, we're improving the pedestrian facilities, down to Las Vegas Boulevard, and even working with the MGM to match what's been done on Las Vegas Boulevard with either barrier rail or bollards to help with that safety, because it's a very congested area pedestrian-wise, and then providing wider sidewalks across the bridge to the west side of I-15 there, making it more accessible for users to get back and forth that are not using vehicles to do so. But I think as we look at a lot of our projects, especially in big urban corridors like that, we're constantly looking at how do we improve, that connectivity for non-motorized users, as well as improve the safety, like many of the discussions that we've had here today.
And then with regard.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I was just
Sorry, if you, thank you. Thank you, Director. If you would just, is that true as you look at that Flamingo corridor as well, or is that specific to just the Tropicana area?
I'm Tracy Larkin Thomason with NDOT. I did want to say, and then Nick may add more, but we do have a safety management plan being reviewed right now for Flamingo, so it's in motion right now to look along that corridor for safety improvements. Do you have any more to add?
For the record, Nick Johnson, NDOT Project Management. The project that we were discussing earlier from Sahara to Flamingo is primarily on the I-15. Now, with that project, as we look at it, there will be ramp improvements or potentially interchange improvements, and that could be Flamingo as well. And as we get into those, if there's needs to, for example, widen Flamingo, the structures, certainly those are the type of improvements that we'd look at including, but I would say the majority of what we're looking at through that NEPA document is primarily on the I-15.
Tracy Larkin with NDOT for the record, but we can also specifically have our chief safety traffic engineer reach out to you with the specifics on that corridor, Flamingo.
Thank you, Director. I really appreciate that. I'd like to spend a little bit more time there and happy to do that offline. Really want to be able to improve access to some of our residents who live in that area to be able to safely navigate between, let's just say, where Palms is and Las Vegas Boulevard, right, to access other pedestrian bridges. And I find that a problematic area for myself as well. So I appreciate your efforts there. Thank you.
Okay, next we will go to Senator Daley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do have a few questions, but I think they're quick and maybe a little esoteric on some of the stuff. When you guys first did, I guess the question, I see you have a Project Neon Phase 2. So the first time DOT was looking at the Project Neon, they were going with a public-private partnership, which included a concession agreement and potentially tolls. DOT's not looking at that on any of these upcoming projects or project that you looked at or the next phase of that. I believe it costs the state more money to do it that way. So if it's off the table, that's all I need to know.
For the record, Nick Johnson, NDOT Project Management. For Neon Phase 2, we're not looking at any P3s or tolling or such at this time. And I don't think we have any intentions to.
That's what I wanted to hear, is that there are no intentions. Because I believe it was a flawed process. We worked hard to make sure it didn't happen at that time. And I think the project went to design build and came out on budget and is working well. Second quick question, how much, if you can, will the state be receiving or is on the line for from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act? And I know that's federal assistance is a big part of the wedge of income. So how much of that is included? And it looked to me like the Verdi Bridge project you guys have coming up is one that's probably being helped by the Infrastructure Act. I'm familiar with those bridges.
Felicia Denny for the record with NDOT. I'd have to look up that particular project. I know that the IIJA has quite a bit of bridge funding that we're utilizing, and I just want to add that whenever we're funding projects, we first look at maximizing our use of federal aid and then looking at other sources. And I think our financial management group and planning groups do an excellent job of procuring that funding. But we can reach out on that particular project and let you know what's in store or what's planned at this point.
And thank you. And I saw projections when the Infrastructure Act first came out that Nevada would potentially be in line for as high as $2 billion or maybe more in funding for projects in Nevada. I hope more. Second, or the next thing is just, if I can, Madam Chair, going quickly, just to comment more than a question. When you were talking about the inflation and nobody likes to see it and all those types of things, I was just going to point out that something we've said for a very long time is that whenever people try to attack prevailing wage and what workers get paid on those projects, on highway projects, as high as 80% of the cost of the project is materials, and nobody ever looks at that. You can't save a significant amount of money on the backs of workers. Just a comment there. No need to say anything more. And I'll make this my last question. On the Clark County gas tax indexing, I understand there was a ballot question and it was not permanent. Is it going to take legislation to extend that? It'd be a pretty good slice of the revenue that you're currently enjoying. And I know we've had that gas tax index for RTC, not necessarily the DOT in Northern Nevada, for a long time. So is it going to take legislation to extend that?
For fuel revenue indexing?
Yes.
The fuel revenue indexing is particularly led by RTC of Southern Nevada, and I'm sorry, Tracy Larkin with NDOT for the record. NDOT does get a portion, the state indexing on that. And I believe what came out of the last legislative session, it was either it was going to be legislation or it goes to the vote of the people.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I might be able to answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Assembly.
Yeah, Vice Chair Watts, go ahead.
So I don't remember the bill number off the top of my head, but yes, the short answer is yes, it takes legislation. The legislature actually did pass a bill last session to address that issue, but it was vetoed.
Hi, Felicia Denny for the record with NDOT. Just to add to what was just mentioned, the bill that was passed that provided the fuel revenue indexing to the state highway fund, the way it was written, it comes up for another vote of the people of Clark County, I believe in 2026, and they can choose to extend the indexing, the increases. If they choose not, as the legislation is currently written, there was a proposal to change that at the last session that did not pass. If the voters decide not to increase the indexing, in other words, continue with increases, but either NDOT or the county has bonds out on projects, which we currently do, those rates will not be reduced. So we're able to move on with some measure of certainty that at least it will not decrease, even if not passed at the 2026 vote.
Thank you. And that's the way I understood the bill or the petition, the vote of the people when it got enacted, that it was temporary and then it would go back. I know it's worked well. When I look at your little piece of revenue that you guys get off of that, I know RTC in Southern Nevada and RTC in Northern Nevada for ours that we passed some time ago has served its purpose and actually funded and paid for a lot of infrastructure improvements and road safety and all of the things we've talked about here today. Well, I'm hoping we can continue to look at that and make sure that we have resources at the state level, which then also helps us get federal dollars because we have to put up a matching amount to maximize the amount we can get to from the feds. I don't know if you want to mention anything about how that works, but I know we have to have income at the state in order to maximize what we can get from the federal government. But that's my last question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Senator Daley, it's Assembly Bill 359. That's the legislation that we passed last session but was vetoed related to fuel indexing. Okay. All right. Do we have any additional questions for the Department of Transportation or Brightline? They've got this really cool high-speed train I hear coming. Committee members have any questions before we let them go? All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Very much appreciated. Actually, I spoke too soon. One thing I'm hoping you all can speak to quickly before we let you go. We talked a lot today about traffic safety. Can you just speak about how you all think about traffic safety as you are doing these projects? Right now, I know you aren't on our streets where we've got stoplights and some of the more traditional ways we think about traffic safety, but I imagine the highway traffic safety administration has best practices, or I'm sure maybe Miss Davy left, but the Office of Traffic Safety, I imagine, probably has some recommendations that are also applicable to highways. How are you thinking about traffic safety as you engage in these large-scale projects?
Tracy Larkin with NDOT for the record. Safety, the component is always looked at on each of our highways, and it becomes more context sensitive depending on whether you're looking at the interstates or as we're looking at the interchanges that come down into neighborhoods, and certainly when we go through rural towns across the state. So like the project in Ely is doing a lot of things for safety. It's a main street in town. That is where US 93 goes through. They're looking at the sidewalks, lighting. Rural areas, in a lot of areas, we are looking at the speed. We are also looking at lighting, what is appropriate for the area. As it was mentioned a couple times throughout different presentations today, the fatality rate for pedestrians and cyclists is particularly high and startling high in Nevada. While the other crashes actually have gone down, pedestrian bicycles have gone up a significant amount. So there's a big emphasis on looking at what kind of features need to be in place, whether it's the bollards that Nick had referred to on there, whether it is improved sidewalks there, improved lighting, looking at the way people actually travel, where are the safe crossing the streets and so on. We're looking at some stuff along US 50 in northern Nevada where we've had some recent pedestrian crashes. We also look very much on 95 and 93. We have a passing lane program that we're looking at because there's a lot of head-on collisions going on the rural areas, and we've had a number of them when you're looking around the Beatty area. So it is a big component of looking at how we look to design the project in general.
Okay, thank you. I'll just we will continue to try and encourage counties and localities to think about innovative ways to, develop their infrastructure in order to make traffic safety. I'll just also invite you all to continue to think about creative ways to keep people safe as we're constantly rebuilding this infrastructure for our structural needs. We might as well get in there and, put up some of the new cool things that we see slow people down and make them safety on our highways as well.
And I can also add that we're very active members working with the Department of Public Safety, also with the Department of DMV, the Office of Traffic Safety on there. So we're a strong partner in those, and we also provide funding for those different activities.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. With that, we will let you all go and slide right on into our last bit of public comment for today. Public comment, again, will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone here in Carson City who would like to give public comment at this time? All right, how about in Las Vegas? Anyone in Las Vegas who'd like to give public comment? Okay, BPS, can we check the phone lines, please?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but we do not have any callers to provide comment right now.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for hanging in there and staying with us here at our second meeting of the Joint Interim Growth and Infrastructure Committee. We are adjourned.
Thank you.